becoming infinitely stronger starting from Marvel. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story and all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 1 begins with being banned from speaking in the multiverse chat group. If you were given the chance to travel to the Marvel Universe, which cheat would you choose? Join the multiverse chat group, or have an attribute panel and the talent to become stronger through training? Another time-wasting choice post like this. I choose the blue pill. In a private villa, a handsome young man looked at the post on his computer and clicked the X in the upper right corner without hesitation. But the moment he closed the post, everything went black, and he completely lost consciousness. Should I call it a transmigration? Or reincarnation? In a small house in downtown New York City, a handsome and spirited Asian young man's eyes showed a hint of realization. His real name was Bai Ye, and he must have been reincarnated into this world 18 years ago. However, because his young body couldn't bear the adult soul, his memories of his past life were forcibly hidden. It wasn't until a few days ago that he regained his memories and belatedly realized that he was actually a transmigrator. But of all places, I had to be reincarnated into the Marvel Universe. I feel like the one above all has already discovered me. Bai Ye covered his head, his face full of helplessness. As the Marvel Universe's backstory, Bai Ye is officially designated as a being surpassing omniscience and omnipotence. Even if it's pseudo-omnipotent, theoretically, the moment one thinks of its existence, it's already been detected. The lack of attention might simply be due to the master's indifference. However, Bai Ye didn't complain for long. Being reincarnated in Marvel's America was already quite good. After all, one can't be picky about transmigration. Compared to those transmigrators who were reincarnated in war-torn Africa or before the Stone Age, or weren't even human, he was considered quite lucky. In this empty little house, Bai Ye muttered to himself in a very low voice, "So, do I have any cheat codes after transmigrating? A system? Deep Blue? A template? A talent? A main god? A chat group? A creation J-disk? A quantum computer? A personal grandpa? A fool who doesn't belong to this earth? I don't care, I'll just pick one." As soon as he finished speaking, two semi-transparent virtual interfaces immediately appeared in front of Bai Ye. They actually exist. I was just saying it casually, and I actually tricked them into revealing their skills. Bai Ye couldn't help but chuckle to himself, then examined the two panels in front of him. In the very center was a dark blue panel, clearly displaying Bai Ye's three-dimensional data. Name, Bai Ye. Lifespan, 18/76, Strength, 1.2 plus, Constitution, 1.1 plus, Spirit, 1.2 plus, Charisma, 1.3 plus, Available Attribute Points, 0.4, Talent 1, Endless, no upper limit, no bottleneck, no weakness, effort leads to strength. Talent 2, the Composure of the Strong. For every attribute point gained, an additional 0.1 available attribute points are added. Description, none. To the right was something resembling a chat box. Perhaps because the central panel was so dominant, the second panel seemed relegated to the side, like a submissive character. The image on this panel closely resembled the QQ interface on a mobile phone, lacking any ads or short videos, and only featuring a chat group called All Heavens Exchange Group. Wait? A tribute panel? All Heavens Exchange Group? Why does this feel so familiar? Bai Ye paused, then memories long buried from years ago were awakened. Was that post from before I transmigrated real? But wasn't it a choice between two options? Did I choose or? Opening the chat group, he browsed through it briefly and found it to be quite deserted. There were only 5 or 6 members in total, with nicknames like Omniscient and Omnipotent Immortal, Ghost-Catching Taoist, Gentleman Sword, Kimishima Kana, and Master Luo. There was no group owner, only one guy called Omniscient and Omnipotent Immortal was an administrator. Bai Ye immediately understood, they were fellow Earthlings. He knew, Kimishima Kana, another newcomer? Welcome, Gentleman Sword, I am Yu Buke, one of the Huishan sect. Welcome newcomers to the chat group. If you have any questions, I can explain them to you. Ghost-Catching Taoist, Newcomers can ask the administrators about their future. Looking at these people's comments, Bai Ye pondered for a moment and prepared to send a hello, but as soon as he opened the input interface, a notification lit up. Sorry, you have been banned by the administrator, omniscient and omnipotent immortal. What does this mean? Bai Ye was completely dumbfounded. In some unknown world, a man was sweating profusely, looking at the Deep Blue account that had been banned under his authority. That was close. I almost got caught. It's a pity the administrator can't kick people out. I'll find a chance to go and kill this fellow villager. Every person entering the chat group automatically generates a signature. When Bai Ye entered the chat group, the omniscient and omnipotent immortal immediately checked the signature of the new member named Deep Blue. Bai Ye's generated personal signature was, so, do I have any cheat codes when I transmigrate? System? Deep Blue? Template? Talent? God? Chat group? Jade disk of creation? Supercomputer? Portable grandpa? Fool who doesn't belong to this era. I don't care, anyone will do. Almost the instant he saw Bai Ye's signature, he understood, this was another fellow transmigrator from his hometown. To preserve his image in the group and ensure his future success, he didn't hesitate to mute Bai Ye. Even now, he was still thankful he acted quickly, otherwise he would have been exposed. Meanwhile, Bai Ye almost immediately understood what had happened, his face darkening. He never expected that this fellow transmigrator from his hometown, whom he had planned to cooperate with in fooling the group members, would turn into a backstabbing incident. It's really a two-way street, Bai Ye said speechlessly, still feeling a bit angry. This feeling of thinking he'd encountered a cheat code but being betrayed was incredibly frustrating. He had never suffered such humiliation before. Master Luo, why isn't the newbie talking? Does he not like talking? Kimijimakana, maybe it's because they don't trust us. It's better if the administrator says a few words. Omniscient and omnipotent immortal, I've already spoken with the newcomer. He said he's detached from worldly desires, and the chat group is just an external thing to him. He hopes everyone will stop bothering him in the future. Gentleman Sword, is that so? It seems this person is a true gentleman. Seeing the omniscient and omnipotent immortal's charade in the chat group, Bai Ye swallowed his anger, not uttering a single harsh word. After all, anger without strength is nothing but impotent rage. I'll remember this great kindness. If I have the chance to meet him again, I will repay him as he did to me, Bai Ye thought silently. Then he focused his gaze back on the deep blue panel at the center, hoping to find a way to repay the favor. New author, new book, please be kind to me. Chapter 2, you can get stronger through training. Name, Bai Ye lifespan. 18/76 strength. 1.2 plus constitution. 1.1 plus spirit. 1.2 plus charisma. 1.3 plus unused attribute points. 0.4 talent 1, endless, no upper limit, no bottleneck, no weakness, effort leads to strength. Talent 2, the composure of the strong, for every point of attribute improvement, an additional 0.1 unused attribute points will be added. Description, none. The entire attribute panel was simple and easy to understand, without any explanation. Looking at the 0.4 unused attribute points, Bai Ye hesitated for a moment before adding them immediately. After all, he understood the principle of starting with the easy points and then moving to the difficult ones. He would try adding points later when it became difficult to improve his attributes. So, for now, he should try out this talent called Endless. I remember what that post from my previous life said, training leads to strength. Bai Ye looked at the clock on the opposite wall. It was already 8:19, meaning class would start in half an hour. The distance to his high school was about 2 kilometers. Walking there as he used to would definitely make him late. Should I just run? After all, running is exercise. Bai Ye pondered for a moment, then immediately grabbed his school bag, rushed out of the room, and ran towards the school. The cool morning breeze brushed against Bai Ye's cheeks, gradually clearing his mind. Looking at the hurried passers-by around him, Bai Ye thought, since I've chosen to exercise, I should do it to the extreme. The next moment, his previously steady jogging speed suddenly changed. Amidst the astonished gazes of the surrounding pedestrians, he sprinted towards the school like a gust of wind. 2 kilometers. For Bai Ye, who was usually in good physical condition, a leisurely jog of 10 minutes would suffice. But running at full speed now was a huge test of his willpower, strength, and endurance. In the first 400 meters, the unrestrained exertion gave his brain a strange sense of comfort, Running at full speed caused no discomfort, and he even felt confident that he could keep running. But Bai Ye's rational mind told him that these were just illusions created by his initial burst of energy. The real pain came in the latter half. After sprinting at full speed for 300 meters, his breathing began to become slightly erratic, and the illusion of abundant energy began to fade. His legs started to feel heavy, his speed decreased, and his skin began to sweat as it cooled down. By the time he reached the 800-meter mark, he could feel the feeling of being out of control. Every step felt like traversing a muddy swamp. Fatigue and weakness spread throughout his body, and from here, his speed dropped significantly, leaving him drenched in sweat. After 1,500 meters, he felt as if his heart was about to leap out of his chest, his muscles ached as if on fire, his breathing was labored like a bellows, and each breath brought distinct pain. Large drops of sweat streamed down his body, and the thought of giving up kept surfacing in his mind. But the only thing that remained unchanged throughout was his eyes, which were always filled with calm emotion. 9 minutes later, at Midtown High School, to the astonishment of his classmates and teacher, Bai Ye took the final, laborious step, placing his foot on the door of Class 2-1. Almost the instant Bai Ye stepped into the classroom, the school bell rang, meaning he wasn't late. "Teacher, hello." Bai Ye greeted the astonished teacher on the podium, his lungs aching with each breath. "Did you run to school? You're so sweaty." "Never mind. Go back to your seat," the teacher said, watching Bai Ye practically shuffle towards his seat. The teacher watched as the sweat-drenched Bai Ye finally reached his seat before continuing the lesson. Beside him, a thin, blonde-haired boy looked at the panting Bai Ye and whispered, "Bai Ye, what happened to you? You weren't really going to be late, so you ran to the classroom, were you?" "Yeah," Bai Ye replied casually, glancing at his classmate, Peter Parker. Having just awakened his past life memories, he suddenly realized that the talkative classmate beside him was actually Spider-Man from the movies, though he hadn't been bitten by a spider yet. While dealing with Peter's incessant, whispered questions, Bai Ye casually opened his attribute panel, completely unconcerned about being discovered. He had already discovered it at home. It didn't appear in the mirror when he opened it, meaning only he could see it. But after opening the panel, he was completely stunned, because the previously blank description section now displayed several lines of text. Description: you completed a run of 2,024 meters with an average pace of 4 minutes 42 seconds km, repeated 5,328 times. Your body suffered 0.12% long-term damage, which can be recovered on its own when your constitution reaches 1.5. Strength decreased by 43%, maximum strength increased by 2.7%. Repeating 193 times increases maximum strength by 0.1. Stamina consumed 74%, maximum endurance increased by 2.2%. Repeating 65 times increases maximum constitution by 0.1. Willpower consumed 46%, maximum willpower increased by 4.3%. Repeating 356 times increases maximum spirit by 0.1. Just repeating a maximum of 356 times will increase all three attributes by 0.1. Bai Ye's eyes lit up as he looked at the instructions. This was clearly showing him what to do next in a data-driven way. And this only showed the training effect of running. What about other exercises? Full power push-ups? Full power sit-ups? Full power squats? Would those be even more effective? But only increasing by 0.1 after more than 300 repetitions? Isn't that a bit too little? Reaching the Hulk strength of hundreds of thousands is probably impossible in a lifetime, right? I have to race against time. Thinking of this, and feeling that time was of the essence, Bai Ye, after regaining some of his strength, stood up and raised his hand, saying, "Teacher, I feel a little dizzy and want to go to the infirmary." The teacher silently looked at Bai Ye, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Peter, would you take Bai Ye to the infirmary?" "Teacher, no need to trouble Peter. I can manage myself." Bai Ye shook his head. As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and ran out of the classroom, much to the astonishment of the entire class. Watching Bai Ye disappear in a flash, the whole class was dumbfounded. "You bastard, skipping class without even pretending." Chapter 3: Staying up all night is equivalent to cultivating immortality. Night fell in a dimly lit room. Bai Ye, hands on the ground, performed push-ups, rising and falling rhythmically 1, 2, 3, 30, 31, 32, 50, 51, 52. After 50, his pace slowed, and a growing soreness crept into his muscles, but he overcame it with sheer willpower, mechanically completing the push-ups with perfect form. After the 60-second, Bai Ye, completely unable to continue, let go and collapsed to the ground, panting as he opened the control panel. Compared to the daytime, the instructions now displayed over a dozen different types of exercises. Instructions: you completed a run of 2,024 meters at an average pace of 4 minutes 42 seconds per km. You completed 89 bodyweight push-ups. You completed 103 bodyweight squats. You completed 1. Looking at the long list on the instructions panel, Bai Ye smiled with satisfaction. After all, it represented the fruits of his day's labor. At this rate, even with all the training methods combined, my stamina will only reach around 1.2 in less than a week. That still feels too little. Oh well, I'll try to train hard for a year anyway. I'll get a gym membership tomorrow. During this year, I'll put my studies aside. If it really doesn't work out, I'll just have to accept the fact that I'm just an ordinary person and repeat a year. He sat up again, exhausted, and began massaging the muscles in his arms. Without proper massage after a workout, the soreness the next day would be unbearable. After a quick massage, Bai Ye glanced at the clock on the wall. It was already 10 p.m. After a quick wash, Bai Ye lay back down on the bed, feeling his body near its limit, and slowly closed his eyes, about to drift off to sleep. But just before falling asleep, he suddenly opened his eyes, because he had thought of a very important question. If I stay up all night, does that count as mental training? Whatever, let me just get through this one night. I'll check the description tomorrow. Thinking this, Bai Ye, who was extremely tired, forced his eyes open. Using the moonlight streaming in through the window, he jumped out of bed and began exercising, dragging his exhausted body through 5 hours of fatigue. Finally, at 4 o'clock the next morning, Bai Ye, unable to hold on any longer, collapsed. In the instant before losing consciousness, a new notification appeared on his description. Description: you completed a continuous activity lasting 21 hours, 13 minutes, and 12 seconds, repeated 954 times. Your body suffered 3.21% long-term damage. This will recover on its own when your constitution reaches 1.5. Willpower consumed 96.7%. Willpower cap increased by 32%. Repeating 3 times will increase your mental cap by 0.1. At noon the next morning, Bai Ye regained consciousness. Getting up from the floor, he rubbed his throbbing head, opened his attribute panel, and was immediately shocked by the status display on the description. This level of improvement is unheard of. No wonder they call staying up all night cultivating immortality. It really does make you stronger. Yesterday I only stayed up for 21 hours and it wasn't enough. Then I'll try 25 hours today. Bai Ye made up his mind, quickly washed up, and opened the refrigerator. To have a healthy body, eating is essential alongside exercise. The refrigerator was full of various foods. Eating these would directly provide all the nutrients the body needs, including protein, fats, carbohydrates, and vitamins. Bai Ye had bought all of these after school yesterday. Furthermore, while ensuring the food was nutritious, he also tried to spend more money on foods that offered similar nutritional value but tasted better than cheaper options. In his view, enduring the hardship of exercise was for a better life in the future, but if one endured hardship for the sake of enduring hardship, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? So, as long as he had the money and it didn't affect his training efficiency, he naturally wouldn't mistreat himself. But wouldn't eating unpalatable food and often going hungry have a better effect on mental training? After all, enduring physical hardship and hunger is a form of tempering one's will. Bai Ye chewed on the expensive food in his hand, guessing to himself. Looking at the delicious-looking food in his hand, Bai Ye hesitated slightly, then took another big bite. He could accept the pain of regular training, but if eating excrement counted as training and could make him stronger, he would rather not have that kind of strength. After spending a few minutes filing his ravenous stomach, Bai Ye tidied up his surroundings and got up to go outside. It was time to put the gym on the agenda. Today was Friday, which was school time, but he had already asked the school for leave yesterday. With Saturday and Sunday, 3 days should be enough to raise his mental attributes to 0.1. He searched for the nearest gym on his phone, and after briefly browsing the reviews of more than a dozen gyms within 5 kilometers, Bai Ye settled on a gym called Minds. The reason for choosing this one was that it was a well-known chain brand in the gym industry, and it had been open locally for 7 or 8 years with a good reputation in the surrounding area. Theoretically, the risk of it closing down shouldn't be too high. Checking the distance, which was only about 1.8 kilometers, Bai Ye didn't hesitate and started running at full speed towards the gym on the street. Bai Ye sprinted towards his goal, and then he was somewhat surprised to find that although his muscles still ached, his running was lighter and easier than yesterday. Even though his stride was more compact than yesterday, his breathing only became somewhat erratic around the 400-meter mark. Although the data panel didn't show it, he could clearly feel that his physical condition had changed significantly in just one day. Description: you completed a run of 1,824 meters at an average pace of 4 minutes 17 seconds per kilometer, repeated 5,670 times. Long-term damage to the body is 0.12%, which can recover on its own when the fitness level reaches 1.5. Repeating 94 times increases maximum strength by 0.1. Repeating 42 times increases maximum constitution by 0.1. Repeating 132 times increases maximum mental strength by 0.1. As Bai Ye stood in front of the gym, comparing the numbers displayed on the progress bar with yesterday's, a sense of satisfaction arose from the realization that hard work pays off. Yesterday, he ran 2 kilometers, exhausting himself, requiring 365 repetitions to increase his mental strength by 0.1. Today, running an easier 1.8 kilometers only required 132 repetitions, a reduction of nearly 60%. This gradual, yet clearly visible process of improvement began to fascinate him. Chapter 4: Purple Cloud Divine Skill. Inside the Mind's gym, after 2 hours of research, Bai Ye directly purchased a year's full gym package for $10,000. This included top-tier membership benefits, a private lounge, and free massages and personal training, though the training content would be customized by Bai Ye himself. You mean I don't need to supervise your workouts, nor do I need to create a training plan for each stage? I just need to check if your every exercise posture is correct. Inside the club, a muscular, 30-something coach, William Smith, stared at the handsome, determined young man before him. He'd never seen such a demand in all his years as a coach. That's right. Just correct me when my posture is incorrect or poses a safety hazard, Bai Ye stated bluntly. As for a training plan, it was completely unnecessary. He'd train relentlessly until he was physically exhausted, pushing every exercise to its maximum. The instructions clearly stated that both long-term injuries and hidden injuries could heal on their own as long as one's fitness level reached 1.5. So, all he needed to do was reach the minimum requirement of 1.5 before his body became paralyzed. If all else fails, I'll just have Deep Blue add some points. Bai Ye looked at his remaining 0.4 attribute points. If he really became paralyzed from training, he could simply use the attribute panel to add points, no problem at all. Anyway, I've already paid the money. If you don't agree, I'll just apply to change coaches or get a refund and move to another gym, Bai Ye threatened directly. In this capitalist country like America, money can buy you a coach. You? Fine, Smith reluctantly compromised. So when are you planning to start training? Time waits for no one. Now of course, Bai Ye's gaze fell on the row of dumbbells of different weights on the gym floor. Let's start with a 20-kilogram one to try it out, then you can start. I'll watch from the side, Smith said casually. At this moment, he already regarded Bai Ye as the kind of rich second generation who was only enthusiastic for 3 minutes and had too much money. Anyway, with me watching from the side, I can warn you if there's any danger. Nothing bad will happen, right? Smith thought to himself. But an hour later, he anxiously said, wait a minute, stop and rest for a while. Hearing Smith's words, Bai Ye, thinking something was wrong, struggled to complete the last crunch, then collapsed on the ground like a dried-out salted fish, feeling his abdominal muscles burning hot. After catching his breath, he said, why do you want me to stop? I followed your instructions exactly, my form should be fine. It's not a problem with your form is already perfect, but your training intensity is too high. If you continue like this, I'm worried you'll develop rhabdomyolysis. Smith's face was full of worry, he was genuinely afraid. In the past hour, Bai Ye had tried 6 or 7 different training exercises, including dumbbells, squats, push-ups, barbells, and crunches, each one designed to push him to the point of exhaustion. His desperate approach was truly insane, especially the last few movements of each exercise. The way Bai Ye endured the pain yet persevered was terrifying. It even gave Smith, who was watching over him, The illusion that Bai Ye's soul might leave his body at any moment. If he was amused half an hour ago, now he was genuinely afraid this young man would become his first client to die at his hands. Hearing the coach say his form was fine, Bai Ye frowned slightly in dissatisfaction. His training had been abruptly interrupted, and he felt he'd lost at least 40% of the effectiveness of his crunches. Having just recovered somewhat, Bai Ye immediately laid down and continued doing the crunches he hadn't finished, while Smith could only sigh helplessly beside him. Bai Ye's workout continued for another 2 hours, during which he still gave his all in every set. However, the continuous depletion of his stamina led to fewer and fewer training sessions, resulting in longer rest intervals between sessions. 2 hours later, after Bai Ye had practically squeezed every muscle in his body except for his genitals, he collapsed onto the yoga mat like a burnt-out pile of ashes. This feeling of near-death weakness was so intense that even a 1,000-year-old zombie king could have its life force drained if it jumped past him. That's enough for today. Let's continue tomorrow, Bai Ye said with difficulty. Alright, I'll carry you to get a massage to relax your muscles. Seeing that Bai Ye had finally stopped, Smith breathed a sigh of relief, thinking to himself, continue tomorrow? With your current physical condition, you'll be lucky if you can even get up tomorrow. Be careful, you might pee blood when you wake up tomorrow, but only Bai Ye could see the achievements he had painstakingly accumulated on his progress bar, with the last record proving his efforts. Progress bar, you completed 1 set of bodyweight squats with a total of 54 repetitions. Repeat 9 times to increase your strength cap by 0.1. Repeat 7 times to increase your constitution cap by 0.1. Repeat 2 times to increase your mental cap by 0.1. Looking at the stat caps that only needed to be increased by single digits, Bai Ye, who had no stamina left, could only wait until tomorrow to train again. After a difficult bath and massage, Bai Ye was helped back to his front door by Smith. Seeing Bai Ye's unsteady gait, Smith finally asked, "Are you sure you don't want to go to the hospital?" "No need. You can go home now. See you tomorrow." Bai Ye braced himself against the wall with his right hand, then turned his back to Smith, slowly walked into the room, and quietly closed the door. "I can't do physical exercise, but I can train my willpower. I promised myself I'd stay up for 25 hours straight. Tonight, I won't sleep until the moon does," Bai Ye decided, then sat down at the computer, pressed the power button, and waited for it to boot up. He planned to search online for some health-preserving exercises like Tai Chi, trying to squeeze every last drop of potential out of his body. Wait, while searching, Bai Ye suddenly had a flash of inspiration, immediately stopping what he was doing and instead opening the multiverse chat group that he had previously blocked and ignored. At this moment, Bai Ye was still blocked from sending messages in the chat group, but that wasn't his goal. In the file list, Bai Ye saw hundreds of files with different contents piled up together. Bai Ye casually clicked on one, and the next second it showed that the download was complete and he could view it at any time. Sure enough, being unable to send messages, being unable to receive files. Confirming his guess, Bai Ye suppressed his increasingly rapid heartbeat and began searching through the group files. A minute later, Bai Ye's eyes lit up because he found a file in the chat group's files. Purple Cloud Divine Skill Uploader, Gentleman's Sword. Chapter 5, Improvement of All Attributes. Within the Multiverse Exchange Group, each member comes from a different world and exists in a different technological era, with most members living before the modern era, a time of less advanced technology. Even a single technology leak from a technologically advanced civilization would be of immense help to a less advanced one. In this newly established group, only 3 people could be considered truly modern: the group administrator, omniscient and omnipotent immortal, Kimijima, and Bai Ye himself. Omniscient and omnipotent immortal, to maintain his aloof and mysterious image, rarely spoke, and naturally wouldn't do something as unbecoming as sharing technical documents. Bai Ye was muted and unable to post documents, so most of the files were posted by the girl named Kimijima. Compared to other members from ancient or modern times, Kimijima, being a modern person, frequently uploaded open technologies such as gunpowder making, rudimentary steel making, and glass making, technologies readily available online. The other members, benefiting from these technologies, couldn't keep them hidden out of courtesy. Given the different worlds, many people generously shared their treasured martial arts techniques. Upon learning that Kana Kamishima was just an ordinary girl, Master Luo uploaded the file Mantis Fist, and the ghost-catching Taoist uploaded the talisman-making method. To cultivate his reputation as a gentleman in the group, Gentleman Sword even posted his sect's most prized possession, Purple Cloud Divine Skill. Bai Ye stared intently at the Purple Cloud Divine Skill file in the chat group, clicking on it without hesitation. Upon opening it, Bai Ye immediately saw the internal energy cultivation method, along with detailed meridian diagrams and annotations. Purple Cloud Divine Skill. All martial arts under heaven prioritize the cultivation of ki. Righteous ki is bestowed by heaven, but ordinary people fail to cultivate it properly, instead using their nature to suppress it. The problem with martial artists lies in their violent and arrogant nature. Looking at the Xixia Divine Skill document, Bai Ye realized that, seemingly to accommodate these newbies, especially considering the Japanese girl, Kimishima Kana, Bai had added a massive amount of annotations, almost like teaching a child. Bai Ye, who was preparing to stay up all night, directly began studying the techniques and the manual, despite his exhaustion. He didn't know how much time had passed, but just before he was about to faint from dizziness, he felt a slight coolness suddenly surge into his brain, clearing his mind. Then, his mental fatigue vanished, and an unprecedented realization dawned on him. Realizing what was happening, he immediately opened his attribute panel. Spirit. 1.21.3 Description: You completed a mental activity lasting 11 hours, 31 minutes, and 25 seconds. Your spirit attribute cap has increased to 1.3. After my spirit increased by 0.1, my spirit no longer feels tired, but my body still has no strength at all. Bai Ye immediately realized that even a 0.1 increase in a single attribute would completely reset the body's status for that attribute. That's why his mental energy bar had fully recovered as the attribute cap increased. Realizing this, Bai Ye focused his attention on the 0.4 points of his unused attributes. If his guess was correct, each point of unused attribute could be used like a senzu bean. If he were injured and near death in battle, he could simply allocate the attribute points to the constitution bar, instantly restoring his weakened body to full strength and making him even stronger. Thinking this, Bai Ye's gaze burned as he looked intently at the constitution and strength attributes. He had originally planned to break through these two attributes after his body recovered tomorrow, but since that was the case, he would do it today. Having made up his mind, Bai Ye first put away the Purple Cloud Divine Skill file in the chat group, then stood up, supporting himself on a nearby table, and began his rehabilitation exercises 1, 2, 3. Bai Ye, with his slightly wobbly legs, lowered his body little by little, following the standard squatting motion taught by Coach Smith at noon, and then stood up. 3 minutes later, after 53 squats, Bai Ye, his legs so sore and his whole body weak, collapsed to the ground. You have completed one set of bodyweight squats totaling 53 repetitions. Repeat 5 times to increase strength by 0.1. Repeat 2 times to increase physique by 0.1. Repeat 1,375 times to increase spirit by 0.1 inches. Looking at the number of repetitions on the instructions, Bai Ye, barely catching his breath, forced himself to do crunches. 7 minutes later, forced to stop the crunches, Bai Ye looked at the instructions. 3 repetitions for strength, 1 repetition for stamina. Completely exhausted, he began to crawl forward, bit by bit, using all his strength, gritting his teeth, like a pupa crawling on the ground. 3 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters. When he had crawled 13 meters on the ground, his body suddenly felt light, and a tremendous force surged within him, forcing him to stand up. Crack, 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 an unknown force was reshaping every part of Bai Ye's body, and subtle cracking sounds emanated from his bones. Skin, meridians, bones, muscles, cells, everything was changing towards its most perfect state. Just as he had guessed, the improvement in his physique would fully restore his physical abilities, but it was more than just a restoration of physical abilities. It was a complete refresh of his physical condition. All the imperfections in his body caused by bad habits over the past 18 years were now completely repaired. On Bai Ye's forehead, the scars from childhood bumps and bruises had faded, and his slightly nearsighted left eye had regained its clarity. His skin, which had been somewhat dull due to melanin deposition from direct sunlight, had become as fair and rosy as a baby's. The dark circles under his eyes from staying up late the night before and the hidden injuries from the past 2 days of exercise had also disappeared in the state refresh. It could be said that Bai Ye was in his most perfect state at this moment. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it a complete transformation. All the negative buffs accumulated in his body over the past 18 years had been cleared away in this improvement in his physique. Perhaps no future state refresh would be as unforgettable as this one. My body, Bai Ye looked at his hands, a smile spreading across his face. This is truly the best start ever. With a sense of satisfaction, Bai Ye opened the panel, then froze, staring blankly at the data on it. Name, Bai Ye lifespan. 18/100 strength. 1.3 plus constitution. 1.2 plus spirit. 1.3 plus charisma. 1.4 plus available attribute points. 0.5 description, you completed a difficult crawl of 13 meters. Increasing your constitution attribute cap to 1.2. You have undergone a transformation, optimizing your body's power structure, increasing your strength attribute cap to 1.3. You have undergone a transformation, correcting physical defects, increasing your charisma attribute cap to 1.4. Total attributes have exceeded 5 points. Talent 2, the composure of the strong, activated, available attribute points plus 0.1. Chapter 6 Charm and Inner Strength. In the dimly lit room, Bai Ye stared in surprise at the changes on his attribute panel. Not only his physique, but also his strength, charm, and unused attribute points had all broken through their limits in the chain reaction brought about by the physique breakthrough. Just this afternoon, he had been considering whether he could improve his mental attribute in the 3 days before school started. But less than a day later, thanks to his own efforts and the small help from the system panel, all his attributes had increased by 0.1. But what's with his charm? Bai Ye was puzzled. The increase in his strength attribute, which was just one step away from a breakthrough, was perfectly reasonable, but what did it have to do with charm? Confused, Bai Ye fumbled for the light and slowly walked into the bathroom. The next second, he was stunned by the figure in the mirror. In the mirror, Bai Ye saw a tall, handsome young man with exquisite features staring at him in astonishment. From his fair, radiant skin to his deep, expressive eyes, every detail was flawlessly perfect. I'm impressed, Bai Ye exclaimed, looking at himself in the mirror. Before this, he had always been quite confident in his appearance. How to describe his previous appearance? Let's put it this way, compared to him, Takashi Kaneshiro paled in comparison, and Daniel Wu was a notch below him. Confident in his looks, he didn't show it much, but he was quite critical of the 1.3 in the charm section of his stats. If his charm was only 1.3, what would a 1.4 look like? But after reaching 1.4, he felt relieved. Indeed, a 1.4 charm would look like him. After briefly examining his appearance, Bai Ye stepped out of the bathroom. In his optimal physical and mental state, he diligently studied the annotations of the Gentleman's Sword and began learning the Purple Cloud Divine skill. Perhaps due to his breakthrough to 1.3 in mental strength, Bai Ye felt a significant improvement in both his memory and comprehension. His learning efficiency was astonishing. In just 2 hours, he had completely memorized the thousands of words of the Purple Cloud Divine Skill's internal energy cultivation method. Sitting cross-legged on the sofa, eyes slightly closed, he gradually cleared his mind and tried to circulate his ki according to the meridian diagram, but after sitting quietly for more than 10 minutes, he felt nothing. Bai Ye wasn't in a hurry, remaining focused and still. According to the annotations of the Gentleman's Sword, a peerless genius could generate a trace of true ki within the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, while a person with outstanding talent would need the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. A person with good talent would need 2 hours, a mediocre person would need half a day, and a useless person would need 1 to 5 days. The difference in talent was enormous. The fact that he felt nothing after more than 10 minutes could only mean that his talent wasn't that of a peerless genius. While silently reciting the mantra, after 35 minutes of meditation, a thin stream of ki finally rose from the Tansong acupoint on the meridian diagram. Sensing the difference, Bai Ye's heart stirred, and he focused his mind, slowly guiding this ki through every meridian in his body, finally storing it in his danshin. So, I guess I'm exceptionally talented, Bai Ye pondered, opening his eyes. A new notification appeared on the notification panel. You have completed a total of 35 minutes and 21 seconds of internal energy circulation, generating a wisp of purple cloud true ki within your body. There's no indication of any increase in physical constitution. Does that mean cultivating internal energy doesn't significantly improve one's physique? Bai Ye thought, recalling the martial artists and the smiling, proud wanderer. Indeed, those who lost their internal energy were similar to ordinary people. But he wasn't discouraged. In Ubuntu's annotations, internal energy, besides prolonging life, could also replenish physical strength. As long as there was enough internal energy, continuous training for 3 days and 3 nights wouldn't be a problem. He continued to focus and circulate his internal energy, gradually strengthening it. Then, every half hour or so, he could generate a wisp of internal energy within his body. The long night passed, and as Bai Ye continued to circulate his internal energy, by dawn, the mere wisp of true ki within his body had increased 20-fold, reaching 2 wisps. As he slowly finished his practice, the faint purple aura that had appeared on his face during the exercise faded away, and his eyes slowly opened, brimming with energy. Whether it was the effect of his internal energy or not, after a whole night without sleep, he felt surprisingly fatigued, his spirit remaining high. He stretched his slightly stiff body, grabbed some food from the refrigerator, ate it quickly, and after a quick cleanup, prepared to head to the gym. The description read, "You have completed a run of 1,824 meters at an average pace of 3 minutes 21 seconds per km, repeated 8,321 times. Long-term damage to your body is 0.05%. You can recover on your own when your constitution reaches 1.5. Repeating 412 times increases your strength cap by 0.1. Repeating 213 times increases your constitution cap by 0.1. Repeating 1,742 times increases your mental cap by 0.1. Looking at the numbers on the description, Bai Ye, who was only slightly out of breath, brightened up. The pace was almost a minute faster than yesterday, a truly rapid improvement. His hard work had clearly paid off. However, with improved physical fitness, the number of repetitions needed to increase the pace by even 0.1 had more than doubled. Satisfied with his improved physique, Bai Ye went straight into the gym and found Smith. "Are you really Bai Ye? Are you sure you're not his twin brother?" Smith looked at the radiant, handsome young man before him, comparing him to the gaunt figure of the previous evening, and wondered if he was hallucinating. Not only was he full of energy, but looking at Bai Ye now, Smith sincerely recommended, "Although I don't know what your purpose is in working out, you don't need to push yourself so hard. With that face, I guarantee you could have a thriving career in the film industry even without any acting skills." "Coach, you're talking too much. I just want to train," Bai Ye emphasized, inwardly annoyed. This guy looked all muscular, but he was such a chatterbox, always interrupting him. "Okay, since your body is fine, let's begin today's training." "What do you want to train first?" Smith asked, shrugging. "Let's start with bodyweight squats," Bai Ye said, then took off his shoes and walked onto the yoga mat. After a simple warm-up, he placed his hands flat and began squatting. 5 minutes later, Smith rubbed his eyes, watching Bai Ye struggling to squat. "What's going on? He's almost done 400 squats already. Yesterday, he was in so much pain after just over 200. Looking at Bai Ye, who had drastically broken his record, Smith was a little skeptical, but even more suspicious was whether the young man's exhaustion yesterday was an act. Chapter 7 Breaking World Records. 427, 428, 429. Inside the gym, under Smith's skeptical gaze, Bai Ye trembled as he performed squats. Based on his previous experience of reaching his physical limits, Bai Ye knew he could probably only manage about 10 more before collapsing. However, unlike before, this time he had 2 strands of internal energy within him. Feeling his stamina was nearly depleted, he continued the squats with difficulty, while the internal energy in his dantian flowed through his meridians to various acupoints in his legs. After circulating throughout his body, the fatigue in his legs immediately subsided. "It really works," Bai Ye was delighted, marveling that it was indeed as Ubuntu's annotations described, it could restore stamina. He then calmed himself and observed the state of his internal energy. After circulating for 1 cycle, the 2 strands of internal energy within his body had directly depleted 1/10, or about 2 strands, meaning he could recover for another 9 squats. Having recovered slightly, Bai Ye continued squatting. After another 20 squats, his muscles reached their limit again. He then manipulated the internal energy in his dantian to replenish his strength. To Smith's astonishment, Bai Ye's squatting speed would slow down to a certain point, then suddenly accelerate, then gradually slow down again, repeating this cycle endlessly. "What's going on? Has this kid taken the wrong medicine? Such a big change? If he does a few more, he could enter the Guinness World Records." Smith had lost count of how many times he had been surprised since meeting Bai Ye, This kid always managed to come up with something new. Finally, under Smith's somewhat numb gaze, Bai Ye exhausted the last bit of internal energy in his dantian, his legs gave way, and he collapsed onto the yoga mat. You completed a total of 663 bodyweight squats. Repeating 62 times increases maximum strength by 0.1. Repeating 32 times increases maximum constitution by 0.1. Repeating 92 times increases maximum spirit by 0.1. As expected, the training effect is several times greater than usual when the body is at its limit, and internal energy can extend the number of times I can train at my limit, which is equivalent to directly using a multiplier experience card. Seeing this, Bai Ye finally confirmed his guess. In that case, I'll train my body to its limit first, and then use internal energy to recover. By repeating this, I should be able to increase my 3 dimensions by another 0.1 before going to school on Monday. As Bai Ye pondered, he sat cross-legged on the yoga mat, recovering the true energy he had consumed that morning, under Smith's bewildered gaze. Compared to increasing the limit of internal energy, recovering lost true energy was much faster, and since his true energy was already pitifully small, it was fully recovered in just a few minutes. After replenishing his internal energy, he looked at Smith and said, "My legs are weak, please carry me up." "What do you want to practice now?" Smith asked. Bai Ye didn't answer, but simply pointed to the bench press rack beside him. And so, Bai Ye improved himself step by step at his own pace, constantly challenging his physical limits with different training exercises. When he couldn't continue training, he used his internal energy to alleviate the strain. When his internal energy was depleted, he stopped training to recover, and after replenishing it, he would switch to new exercise. Through continuous training, he gradually adapted to the pain. At night, he would return to his room to cultivate the purple cloud divine skill, increasing his true energy limit. The logbook 18 hours later read, "You completed a total of 1,392 bodyweight squats, increasing your constitution attribute limit to 1.3. The logbook 24 hours later read, "You completed a total of 831 push-ups with a 30-kilogram load, increasing your strength attribute limit to 1.4. Finally, after 27 hours without sleep, and exhausted Bai Ye stared straight ahead, his gaze unwavering, and threw a perfect straight punch at the dynamometer. The moment he struck, a deafening roar echoed throughout the gym, and the numbers on the dynamometer began to jump rapidly: 200,300,400,500,600. Finally, to Smith's incredulous gaze, the number on the dynamometer stopped at 672 pounds. At the same time, a cool sensation washed over Bai Ye's mind, clearing his consciousness. Even without looking at the panel, he knew that his mental attribute had increased to 1.4. My God, how is this possible? 672 pounds. That's beyond the world record, Smith exclaimed, while Bai Ye stared silently at his attribute panel. Name, Bai Ye. Lifespan, 18/120. Strength, 1.4 plus constitution, 1.3 plus spirit, 1.4 plus charisma, 1.4 plus available attribute points, 0.5. Can a mere 1.4 strength really break the world record for ordinary humans? Bai Ye felt something was off about the values on this panel. When his strength was 1.2, he couldn't even reach half of that number. Yet, a mere 0.2 increase in the value had more than doubled his physical attributes. Furthermore, after 2 days of investigation, he had discovered some hidden content on the panel. For example, the strength category wasn't just about muscle strength, it also included movement speed. Constitution represented physical resilience, cultivation speed, and healing speed. As for the spirit attribute, it represented willpower, nerve reaction speed, control, memory, observation, and comprehension. The reason for this deduction was that when Bai Ye's constitution increased, his cultivation speed of the purple cloud divine art also increased. After his physique reached 1.3, he could condense a wisp of purple cloud true ki in just 15 minutes, reaching the level of a peerless genius described in Yu Buquin's annotations. But what surprised him even more was that his entire body seemed to be connected as one. When he did squats, the strength of his arms would also increase due to the leg training, and the same applied to his cultivation speed. In other words, although he hadn't trained Niu, it didn't mean Niu hadn't trained. This attribute panel seems to have many secrets to uncover. Why isn't there an instruction manual or anything? Bai Ye thought somewhat unsatisfiedly. Then Bai Ye said to Smith, "That's enough for today. I have school tomorrow, Monday, so I might have to wait until after school to come back for training. So you can arrange your time freely before 3 o'clock. Okay, Smith said cautiously. Seeing Bai Ye's tremendous transformation, Smith now regarded Bai Ye as a mutant in his mind. And because of the propaganda of the entire human government, the identity of mutants was as repulsive as rats crossing the street. He even hesitated whether to report Bai Ye to the police and send him to a mutant containment facility. Of course, this was just an idea of his. Now, Bai Ye was his client, and aside from the occasional surprise, he was quite relaxed watching Bai Ye work out, still getting paid as usual. There was no need for him to meddle. After leaving the gym, Bai Ye, feeling physically fit and mentally refreshed from his breakthrough, went straight home. Simple physical exercise was no longer enough for him. He wanted to try out some ideas. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, In the Sulfuric Acid Pool, It's Like Taking a Bath. As evening fell, Bai Ye stood in front of his small house. A tightly wrapped package lay at the doorway. He bent down to pick it up, but just before he was about to go inside, someone called out to him from behind. "Hello, did you order delivery?" the deliveryman asked, checking the address on the delivery slip as Bai Ye approached. Seeing his package arrive, Bai Ye turned around and nodded. "Yes, I ordered delivery. The last 4 digits of my phone number are..." The deliveryman paused for a few seconds, looking at Bai Ye's face, then somewhat apologetically pulled out the delivery slip, saying, "Please sign for this. Also, you ordered quite a lot. Do you need me to help you carry it inside?" Bai Ye quickly signed his name and shook his head. "No need, just leave it here. I'll carry it in myself." "Oh, okay," the deliveryman nodded, laboriously unloading the large package from his vehicle and placing it in front of Bai Ye. He then watched in surprise as the seemingly frail but handsome young man effortlessly lifted the several hundred-pound package with one hand and strode quickly into the house. Entering the house, Bai Ye eagerly opened the package. Inside was a custom-made glass bathtub, 160 centimeters long and 70 centimeters wide, and a 50-centimeter glass rod. The package that had been placed at the front door contained 10 liters of 98% pure sulfuric acid in a glass container. Purchasing through official channels was too troublesome, so he bought it from the dark web. Under the light, the glass items shimmered, looking exquisitely beautiful. Full of anticipation, Bai Ye carried the custom-made glass bathtub into the bathroom, then put on protective clothing and took several buckets of purified water from the Walmart next door, pouring them directly into the bathtub. He then unscrewed the glass cap of the concentrated sulfuric acid and slowly poured it into the bathtub. During the dilution process, watching the concentrated sulfuric acid mix with the purified water, he continuously stirred the water with a glass rod, releasing heat in the process. Watching the colorless and odorless sulfuric acid flow into the glass bathtub, and waiting until it was ready, Bai Ye removed his gloves and gently dipped his finger into the slightly warm, diluted sulfuric acid bath. Feeling the warm water, Bai Ye removed all his clothing except for his hood, then laid down expressionlessly, leaving only his head exposed, savoring the slight corrosive effect of the ultra-diluted sulfuric acid on his body. Where there's a will, there's a way. Since so-called training is a process of muscle damage and repair, why not go all the way and increase the strength of his skin? At this moment, his physique had reached 1.3, his skin retained both elasticity and considerable toughness. Experiments showed that a regular knife required some force to cut his skin, and the wound would stop bleeding rapidly within 30 seconds and scab over and heal within a day. These characteristics were beginning to move towards inhumanity, which was the source of his confidence in taking a sulfuric acid bath. "I'll sleep here tonight," Bai Ye thought to himself. He then calmed himself, ignoring the slight stinging sensation from the sulfuric acid, and began cultivating the purple cloud divine art, quickly entering a state of complete absorption. During this process, the sulfuric acid inside the glass bathtub continuously corroded Bai Ye's skin. Although the corrosiveness of the sulfuric acid was almost negligible due to its dilution, after several hours, Bai Ye's skin began to give way. However, as the skin's surface was corroded, Bai Ye's healing abilities began to take effect, maintaining a delicate balance between destruction and healing. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Bai Ye, his face shrouded in a purple aura, exhaled a long breath of turbid air, slowly gathering the internal energy flowing throughout his body back into his danshan. Feeling the 8 strands of true energy quietly dormant within his danshan, Bai Ye slowly opened his eyes, inwardly marveling. The 1.3 physique has doubled my cultivation efficiency. The true energy I accumulated in one night is equivalent to the total of the previous 2 nights. If I had a 1.4 or 1.5 physique, I wouldn't be able to, hiss. Bai Ye, deep in thought, gasped sharply. Just as he tried to get up, he felt a sharp, stabbing pain in his skin below his neck. Looking down, his skin, soaked in the bathtub, was a deep, blood-red patch, resembling a boiled shrimp. He practically trembled as he climbed out of the tub, the stinging pain, especially in his lower body, causing him to gasp repeatedly. The sensation was excruciating, like being skinned alive. His body felt like it was being marinated in sulfuric acid. As Bai Ye stepped out of the tub, a new message appeared on his status bar. You have completed a diluted sulfuric acid bath lasting 9 hours, 17 minutes, and 26 seconds. Repeat 5 times to increase your constitution cap by 0.1. Looking at the message, Bai Ye's eyes lit up. His experiment had indeed been successful. The destruction and regeneration of his body could indeed improve his constitution. Next time, he would lie in a sulfuric acid bath and use electroshock therapy, a combined internal and external approach, for even more remarkable results. Bai Ye got up, enduring the throbbing pain in his skin, and carefully dried himself with a towel before putting on his clothes. Glancing at the time, Bai Ye realized it was still early before school. He quickly ate his food to fill his stomach and then started doing push-ups in his room. With his strength at 1.4 and constitution at 1.3, Bai Ye's physical abilities were gradually approaching the limits of the human body. He didn't even need internal energy to sustain himself. He could do over 3,000 push-ups in one go, relying solely on his physical strength. Enduring the stinging sensation of his skin rubbing against his clothes, Bai Ye completed over 5,800 push-ups with standard form in an hour before collapsing to the ground, exhausted. Sweat seeped from his skin like salt being rubbed into a wound. Too slow. After improving his physical strength, training solely based on his body weight takes too long. I definitely need to train with weights. Bai Ye was somewhat dissatisfied with the wasted time. Glancing at the time again, he saw there were still about 10 minutes before class. Bai Ye calmly picked up his school bag, opened the door, and rushed towards school. What was a hellish journey for him 3 days ago was now a complete challenge for Bai Ye. He didn't even experience heavy breathing throughout the entire run. The only pain was the stinging sensation from the friction of his clothing while running. On the road, his running body was almost a blur. Passers-by didn't even have time to react before he overtook them, leaving them only to stare in disbelief at his retreating figure. You completed a run of 2,024 meters at an average pace of 2 minutes and 20 seconds per kilometer, repeated 15,328 times. Your body suffered 0.11% long-term damage, which can be self-recovered when your fitness level reaches 1.5. Chapter 9 shows the health bar. The running data has already broken the world record. Bai Ye looked at the prompt on the display panel. He ran the 2 kilometers in just 4 minutes and 40 seconds, 2 seconds faster than the current human record for the 2 kilometers. Of course, Bai Ye knew that it wasn't that his strength or speed exceeded the limits of humanity, but rather that his average physical fitness was approaching those limits. Although at this moment his endurance was not as good as long-distance runners, his speed was not as good as sprinters, and his strength was also inferior to those strongmen who could pull airplanes. However, the balance of his overall data allowed him to easily break the records of professional athletes who surpassed him in individual physical fitness. It can be understood that he had the greatest strength in sprinting, the strongest endurance in weightlifting, and the fastest speed in long-distance running. Hey, Bai Ye, why did you take Friday off? Just as he was thinking, a hand casually put its arm around his shoulder from behind, the force acting on his sensitive skin, making him wince in pain. Bai Ye endured the pain and grabbed the arm on his shoulder, pulling it off. Evan, I don't like it when someone puts their hand on my shoulder like that, Bai Ye said, turning around to Evan, but the other just stared at him blankly. Oh my god, Bai Ye, did you get plastic surgery this weekend? Evan looked at Bai Ye's face in surprise, instinctively reaching out to pinch it, but Bai Ye grabbed his hand. Bai Ye said with a look of disgust, I told you, I'm not used to hugging and cuddling. You're not gay, are you? Of course not, but you really didn't get plastic surgery? Which hospital has the technology to achieve this kind of effect? I could accept it. Evan wanted to ask more, but Bai Ye, already annoyed by him, ignored him and walked straight to his seat. Just as he sat down, Peter next to him looked at him in surprise and said, Bai Ye, you look so much more handsome now. You could become a star right now. Why are you saying that? Bai Ye said speechlessly. Then he realized that not only Peter, but also the classmates around him were subtly noticing his face, surprised at how handsome Bai Ye had become. If he might have considered becoming a star before, with the attribute panel, his goal wasn't the spotlight anymore. He wanted to try playing the role of a god among men. Then, no one could stop him from doing what he wanted, and if he was unhappy, he could even tell the President of the United States, I don't eat beef. The whole world would revolve around his thoughts, making him the biggest star in the world, with not a single hater. Do you know how envious I am of your looks? If I were as handsome as you, I'd debut as a star right away, and Uncle Ben and Aunt May wouldn't have to keep working so hard. Peter's face was full of envy. After all, his family wasn't well off. His parents died early, and he was raised by Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Then Peter remembered something and said, "Oh right, last Friday when you weren't here, the teacher announced that our whole class would be visiting the Osborne Group on Wednesday. If we performed well, we could even get an internship at this big company. You were absent that day, so the teacher asked me to inform them." Why are you looking at me like that? Peter was halfway through his sentence when he noticed Bai Ye's gaze become somewhat complicated. Nothing. Just congratulating you in advance. Bai Ye shook his head and said. The Spider-Man storyline would begin then, and he'd embark on the same path as Batman. With great power comes great responsibility. Congratulations to me? Do you think I'll be selected for an internship in Osborne? Peter laughed. Sort of. Bai Ye didn't know what to say, hoping he could save Uncle Ben before he was shot. As he spoke, he habitually opened his attribute panel, only to find a change in the description. Description: attack detected. Analyzing opponent's data. Name: Chris. Strength 1.1, agility 1.0, constitution 1.0, spirit 1.0, charisma 1.1. Huh? So this is the health bar showing. Bai Ye looked at the front row, recalling the pain Ike had caused his shoulder earlier, and immediately guessed what was going on. Peter, pat me, Bai Ye said seriously. Why? Peter looked at Bai Ye inexplicably, then gently patted Bai Ye's back. As the pain intensified, the notification panel displayed another message: attack detected. Analyzing opponent's data. Name: Peter Parker. Strength 0.9, agility 1.0, constitution 0.8, spirit 1.6, charisma 1.0. He really is quite thin. His average 3 dimensions aren't even below 1.0. But why don't I have an agility column? Bai Ye thought for a moment, then could only guess that his agility and strength columns had merged, since speed is power. Not long after, the school bell rang, and the teacher entered the classroom as usual, beginning his daily teaching. However, sitting in the back row, Bai Ye gradually felt restless as he listened to the teacher's lecture. After 3 days of training, feeling his physical abilities rapidly improving, he was no longer satisfied with these leisurely days of listening to the teacher in the classroom. After all, with his spirit reaching 1.4, he could easily master a semester's worth of teaching content by simply flipping through a book in one night. He no longer wanted to waste time on meaningless classroom learning. At this moment, he wished he could go straight back to the gym to continue improving himself. This damn school is unbearable. I'll practice the purple cloud divine skill for a while, Bai Ye thought to himself. He then closed his eyes slightly, buried his face in his arms, and prepared to circulate his internal energy, but he completely underestimated his own attractiveness. Bai Ye's appearance was already outstanding among humans. After the transformation brought about by his improved physique, he was like a lantern lit in the night, the most dazzling star in the entire school. Under the watchful eyes of the whole class, it was incredibly difficult to slack off in class. Sure enough, just as he lowered his head and before he even began to circulate his energy, a concerned voice came from the podium. Bai Ye, are you feeling unwell? The young female teacher, Emma, asked with concern. Bai Ye reluctantly raised his head and replied, Yes, teacher, I feel a little dizzy and want to go to the administration office. Dizzy? Why don't I go with you to the infirmary? Emma's words immediately drew the attention of the entire class, Both boys and girls. Was that really concern? I didn't even want to call you out on it. No need, teacher, I can go by myself. Bai Ye gently shook his head, and then, under Emma's disappointed gaze, silently walked out of the classroom alone. Chapter 10 Gwen Stacy. On the rooftop of the teaching building at Zhongcheng High School, Bai Ye gripped the railing, gazing into the distance. He was contemplating dropping out now. After all, his background was the same as everyone else in the Kidian orphanage. Not studying didn't matter. Yes, in this world, Bai Ye had no parents, or rather, for him in this world, having biological parents was worse than not having any. After a moment's hesitation, he abandoned the idea. His plan before regaining his memories was to study hard, stay away from the underworld, and live the life of a wealthy person. Bai Ye was currently thinking with a headache, trying to figure out how to make money quickly. His hard-earned living expenses had already been mostly used up in a series of expenses. As for studying, although he wouldn't drop out, he could always skip classes. He could procrastinate as long as he could. This is so annoying. If all else fails, I'll just become a gigolo for a rich woman. I can't possibly rob a bank like I used to, Bai Ye complained. It could only be said that his memories awakened a little too late. Otherwise, with his memories from his previous life, he could have exploited a time difference and, if not become a billionaire, at least be free from financial constraints, instead of being troubled by a mere tens of thousands of dollars. Standing on the rooftop, he gazed into the distance, feeling the gentle breeze. Bai Ye took a deep breath of the cool air, looking at the towering skyscrapers of New York City. As he looked down at the ground below, a new training method suddenly arose in his mind. Would putting his body in a life-or-death situation be more effective for mental training? The moment the thought arose, Bai Ye took off his coat, gripped the edge of the railing firmly, and in the next moment, his perspective reversed, and he was upside down on the smooth iron railing. Although his arms kept his body stable in midair, being several meters high, even the slightest mistake could result in a fall, leaving him either dead or crippled. In this state, Bai Ye's breathing became slightly rapid, and his adrenaline surged, bringing an unprecedented level of concentration to his senses. This was precisely a peculiar method in traditional martial arts, stealing the secrets of heaven. Scientifically speaking, it involves placing the body in a constantly dangerous situation, using the power of the environment to concentrate energy and accelerate blood flow, creating an extreme mode. Similar to the night before university exam, where study efficiency skyrockets, and under the pressure of failing, one can quickly pass an exam within a few hours. After stabilizing his body, Bai Ye concentrated all his weight on his right hand, then lifted it behind his back and began doing one-handed handstand push-ups. The control afforded by his 1.4 mental attribute made every movement as stable as a machine. Under the pressure of death, every rise and fall of his body tightened his nerves, followed by a constant stream of thoughts of retreat, but Bai Ye's brain firmly suppressed these. His gaze was fixed on the plus sign in the Constitution section of the attribute panel. If his balance faltered even slightly, he would immediately transfer all available attribute points to the Constitution section. With his physique boosted to 1.9 and the protection of his internal energy, he wouldn't be completely unharmed, but he'd at least survive a fall. While Bai Ye wouldn't intentionally put himself in such a perilous situation, it would be cowardly of him to back down under such multiple safeguards. 132, 133, 134. With such focused concentration, even without weights, each one-handed handstand push-up consumed extra energy to maintain stability. Soon, after 160, Bai Ye's stamina began to wane, his arms started trembling uncontrollably, forcing him to channel internal energy from his dantian to maintain balance. Creak, just as Bai Ye was intently performing the handstand push-ups, the iron door creaked open. A blonde girl pushed open the door and entered, seeing a handsome young man with fair skin and a slightly flushed neck sitting nonchalantly by the railing, watching her. "Excuse me, it should be class time now. Don't you think you've come to the wrong place?" Bai Ye casually sat on the railing before the girl opened the door, casually sizing her up. With long, wavy, golden hair, delicate features, and a beautiful figure, Bai Ye would rate her charm a high 1.3. "That's what I should be asking you, Bai Ye. Are you also here to rest during your extracurricular training?" The girl raised an eyebrow, also looking Bai Ye up and down, and said with a smile. "You know me?" Bai Ye asked, puzzled. "Of course I know you. At last year's welcome party, everyone in the school should remember you. I just have a good memory and vaguely remember your name." The blonde girl slowly walked forward, admiring Bai Ye's appearance as she extended her right hand, saying, "Let's get acquainted. My name is Gwen Stacy." Bai Ye hadn't expected the person in front of him to be Gwen Stacy. Out of politeness, he reached out to lightly shake her hand. But upon contact, her hand was grabbed and gently pulled, dragging Bai Ye down from under the railing. "Don't you think sitting by the railing is dangerous?" Gwen smiled lightly. Bai Ye glanced at the woman speechlessly, suspecting this overly familiar woman was trying to pick him up. At the same moment of contact, due to a slight stinging sensation on his arm, Bai Ye also saw her stats. Name, Gwen Stacy. Strength, 1.0, Agility, 1.0, Constitution, 0.9, Spirit, 1.1, Charisma, 1.3. Confirming that she wasn't some Spider-Verse version of Gwen, but just an ordinary, harmless person, Bai Ye felt there was no need to pay too much attention. He put his coat back on the railing, put his hands in his pockets, and walked towards the door, saying, "You can rest here. Goodbye." Seeing Bai Ye about to leave, Gwen wanted to say something, but Bai Ye's figure vanished from the rooftop in a flash, leaving her only to sigh helplessly. Coming down from the rooftop, Bai Ye observed the changes in his attribute panel. Although Gwen's appearance had forced him to stop training halfway through, the method of stealing heavenly secrets was still quite effective. The training in strength and constitution only slightly increased his stats, but the number of training sessions for mental attributes decreased by about 50%. "Keep it up. My desk mate is going to become Spider-Man in a few days. Once he transforms, I can see his three-dimensional attributes and roughly estimate the increase in each attribute point," Bai Ye thought to himself. He then found an empty room nearby and began slowly cultivating the purple cloud divine art. When he came to his senses, it was already 10 p.m. at school. "This book is already under contract, so please feel free to invest. I can handle any recommendations, monthly tickets, or rewards." Chapter 11, 1-5. Deep Blue Skill Points. In an empty room at Zhongcheng High School, Bai Ye looked up at the bright moonlight streaming through the window, realizing he had been lingering in the classroom for quite some time. Feeling the 5 extra strands of true energy in his Danshan, Bai Ye realized he had been cultivating for about 10 hours. "I was so engrossed in cultivation that I even forgot about exercising. I should set an alarm next time." He stood up, gently stretching a couple of times. His skin had completely recovered during this time, and it was time for the next stage of his bath. Bai Ye opened the door and went out, heading home by the light of the streetlights, intending to catch up on all the exercise he had missed during the day. But as he passed through the street, a huge explosion came from the bank next door, the deafening roar audible for miles around. "What's going on?" Startled by the sudden loud noise in the middle of the night, Bai Ye instinctively took a step back. Then, realizing what was happening, he hesitated for a moment before heading towards the bank. At this moment, the tally bank was already closed. A roughly 25-meter high, irregularly shaped hole had been breached in the outer wall of the bank's vault. A robber, armed with a rifle and dressed like Batman, stood guard at the blown-open entrance. 3 other hooded robbers filed in through the hole and, before the police arrived, methodically began looting the cash and jewelry from the vault, clearly a well-rehearsed operation. They really are robbing a bank. No wonder this is the land of free America, but they chose a bad location. There are hundreds of banks in New York, and they chose this one in the city center. It's so close to the police station, even at night, the police could arrive in 10 minutes. The car is using a fake license plate, but why is there only one person guarding outside? There's no one in the car. This robbery team is too rudimentary. Bai Ye, observing the scene of the bank's workers diligently working inside, analyzed the situation from a distance of a dozen meters. Although he considered this robbery team to be a fledgling amateur group, with a higher risk of being caught afterward, he believed this job should be successful. After checking that there were no surveillance cameras nearby, he prepared to act. Of course, this wasn't some kind of righteous act. He was just short on cash lately, so he was planning a double cross. Looking at the robbery team guarding the cave entrance by only one person, Bai Ye hesitated for a moment before summoning his attribute panel. Name, Bai Ye. Lifespan, 18/120. Strength, 1.4 plus Constitution, 1.3 plus Spirit, 1.4 plus Charisma, 1.4 plus unused attribute points, 0.5. These past few days, looking at the unused attribute points on his panel, he'd been thinking about adding 0.1 to test the effect. After all, who knew what would happen if he didn't try? This opportunity presented itself, a perfect chance to test the effect. Bai Ye hid behind the wall, hesitated for a moment, then raised his hand and lightly tapped the plus sign in the strength column. The next moment, the values on the attribute panel changed. Name, Bai Ye. Lifespan, 18/120 strength, 1.4 plus 0.1 constitution, 1.3 plus spirit, 1.4 plus charisma, 1.4 plus available attribute points. 0.4 description, you have equipped 0.1 attribute points to strength, making your actual strength 1.4. The additional 0.1 strength attribute point makes your displayed strength 1.5. What does this mean? This 0.1 increase isn't included in the strength I've trained? Is it considered extra equipment? Bai Ye wondered, looking at the description. But the next moment, a cool aura began to flow into his limbs and bones, beginning to transform his body. His joints began to make slight cracking sounds. The enhancement from the added points allowed him to clearly feel the increase in his strength. In just a few breaths, he felt his strength had increased by about 50%. There was no pain or discomfort, only a sense of confidence brought by the increased strength. He was certain that the strength and speed he was displaying had exceeded the human limit. He clenched his fist lightly, feeling the flesh and bones in his arm crack and creak under the immense force, bringing a slight pain. He knew his body was telling him that his physique was starting to lag behind the increase in strength. Won't the increase in strength attribute lead to an increase in physique as well? Bai Ye sighed regretfully. He had originally thought that as strength increased, physique would also increase slightly to maintain balance, but it seemed that loophole was no longer available. At the same time, this experience also proved that the process of adding points really had no side effects. It was just a matter of a moment, and he could really use it like a senzu bean. After adding points, Bai Ye calculated the time. He had to finish the battle within 8 minutes, or he might run into the police. Feeling that he had plenty of time, Bai Ye took off his coat and turned it inside out to wrap his right hand to prevent fingerprints. At the same time, he took off his shirt to cover his face below his eyes. Then, he bent down slightly, walked around to the side door of the bank, and with a light leap, using his right hand to support himself on the exposed edge of the second floor, he easily jumped to the second floor like a nimble ape. With a light, tiptoeing gait, under the control of his 1.4 mental strength, he silently approached the top of the blasted crater, lying in wait for his opportunity. Inside the bank vault, 3 robbers were busily moving US dollars, foreign currency, gold, securities, banknotes, and jewelry stored there. The looted goods were stuffed into sacks and tossed through the blasted hole to their accomplices outside, who could then load them into their car. This process was repeated, maximizing the collection of valuables within 5 minutes, after which they would drive away regardless of what remained. Bai Ye crouched on the second floor, his right hand lightly resting on the eaves, looking down at the robbers below. A rifle was in his left hand, while his right hand carried the cash thrown out by his accomplices as he walked towards the car, inwardly criticizing how unprofessional this was. Taking advantage of the robbers' momentary lapse in attention, Bai Ye swiftly flipped over and leaped from the second floor onto the robber's back, delivering a powerful punch to his chest. The robber didn't even utter a sound before instantly falling into a deep, infant-like sleep. He gently supported the robber's body, dragged him aside, and then expertly removed and donned his full gear in under 40 seconds. The acquired items included a hood, black gloves, a rifle, an outer jacket, and trousers. As for the bulletproof vest the robber wore underneath, Bai Ye decided it was too time-consuming and skipped it. After changing his clothes and hood, he silently stood at the entrance of the hole, where another bag of valuables was tossed out. He bent down and silently picked it up, then, as before, dragged the money onto the trunk of a parked car. He then returned to the entrance, waiting for the next bag of money to be tossed out on its own. Chapter 12 was portrayed as a supervillain. "Boss, we've struck it rich this time." Inside the vault, one of the robbers excitedly clutched a bag of cash. "Stop talking nonsense, time's up, let's get out of here, the police will be here soon," the leader of the robbers urged, then bent down to exit through the hole with the last bag of cash. But he had only just reached the door when a man in a leather coat and a black hooded mask crouched down, holding a loaded rifle, the muzzle pointed at them. "Fourth brother, what are you doing?" "Get out of the way and let us out," one of the robbers asked, but the leader's expression behind his mask changed, realizing something was wrong. He tried to draw his gun, but the bullets from the rifle instantly pierced his wrist. Bang bang bang. The next moment, the muzzle of the rifle spat fire, and before the men could react, several bullets accurately pierced their ankles, blood flowing from the wounds. The men never expected that there would be a sixth brother guarding the door, and they fell down one by one, howling in pain. After confirming that none of the men had gone far due to their leg injuries, Bai Ye immediately got into the vehicle they had prepared for their escape and drove off. 10 minutes later, Bai Ye parked the old-fashioned sedan with fake license plates in a deserted suburb. He took out a sack of money from the car and counted it. He had approximately $400,000, 7 gold bars of varying weights, and some jewelry and receipts. If he sold everything, he could probably get over $1 million in cash. Looking at the assets in front of him, Bai Ye couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Next was the money laundering work, but he wasn't worried about that, since he had connections. Bai Ye paused slightly because he heard the tapping sound of a cane on the ground behind him. Fully alert, he turned around and saw a white man with a cane, wearing a red hood covering his nose and above, and dressed in a tight leather jacket walking towards him. Bai Ye. He really didn't know what to say this time. Running into a bank robbery was bad enough, but to rob the rich and help the poor was even worse, and now he'd run into Daredevil in the middle of nowhere. Why was he so unlucky tonight? "Hey kid, you took something that doesn't belong to you," the man said with a strange smile. "Daredevil? Aren't you and Kingpin locked in a love-hate relationship? Why are you in this secluded place so late at night?" Bai Ye said, backing away step by step until he reached the front door of the car, his left hand resting on the open window, a harmless smile on his face. "You've heard of me? Then you should know what I'm going to do to you. If you cooperate and turn yourself in, you won't have to suffer." Daredevil approached step by step, leaning on his baton, his expression relaxed. After all, dealing with a petty thief was just a dessert after dinner. But when he got within 3 meters of Bai Ye, Daredevil's expression changed slightly. With 2 sharp clicks, the man in front of him rapidly switched on the car stereo. Judging from the echoing sound, the man was even faster. Instantly, the year's hottest song playing on the radio blared across the empty highway, and along with the music, Bai Ye launched a powerful right kick. Whoosh! The kick, exceeding the limits of physical strength, pierced the air with a sharp whooshing sound, heading straight for Daredevil's chest. But Daredevil caught the sound first, quickly discerning Bai Ye's attack distance amidst the chaotic music. Because Bai Ye's attack was so fast, and both were at the limits of human strength and speed, the difference in physical power wasn't significant. Coupled with the noise interference, by the time Daredevil reacted, he had no way to dodge. He could only lean back, lower his center of gravity slightly, and use the opening to raise his baton to block in front of his chest. Thump! A sound like a stone hitting metal came from the iron bar. Daredevil was kicked directly, his legs scraping the ground for 4 or 5 meters before he barely stopped sliding. Bai Ye used the recoil to somersault in the air and returned to the car. Without hesitation, he reached out the window to retrieve his rifle and fire 2 bursts at Daredevil. But his arm was immediately entangled by a silver wire. What bound Bai Ye was the grappling hook that popped out from the end of Daredevil's multifunctional baton. Daredevil had now abandoned his previous nonchalant attitude, his face serious. From their exchange, he knew that although this guy sounded young, his strength was not to be underestimated, and he was likely a future supervillain. Fortunately, he had already figured out Bai Ye's strength from their fight. Although he was somewhat clever, he seemed to lack any fighting skills and had no intention of killing anyone. While he was slightly stronger and faster than him, his physical defense was strangely unpredictable. Judging from the sound of the kick that struck his stick, the opponent's right foot was likely fractured. Sigh, with his right hand controlled, Bai Ye sighed helplessly, immediately abandoning his plan to take the gun. He grabbed the grappling hook and charged towards Daredevil. Damn it, I'll just finish him off in one move, Bai Ye thought to himself as he ran. Daredevil, hearing the momentum of Bai Ye's charge, also became serious, preparing to end the fight in one move. Crack! 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 What the hell is that noise? A hint of doubt suddenly appeared on Daredevil's face. A series of fine cracking sounds were coming from Bai Ye's charging body. Daredevil recognized some of them as the pain of his leg bones straining under the immense force of running. But the other cracking sounds, which Daredevil didn't know, were the sounds of Bai Ye's body healing and breaking down as he enhanced his abilities. Yes, during the run, Bai Ye increased his strength a little more, reaching 1.6. Wait, this speed is wrong. Daredevil was shocked, but by the time he realized it, it was too late. Bai Ye's figure had already phantom-like closed in on him. Kwang, Bai Ye's left foot slammed into the asphalt road like an old tree taking root, the immense force penetrating the ground and leaving a half-inch deep footprint in the hard road. His other leg, raised like a cannonball, slammed into Daredevil's unguarded chest, leaving him no way to avoid it. With a clear sound of bones cracking, Daredevil was sent flying, spinning through the air for 8 or 9 meters before spitting out a mouthful of blood and collapsing to the ground, unable to get up again. Chapter 13 Equipment Attribute Points. In the middle of nowhere, outside a car blaring music, two men, one lying horizontally and the other vertically, stared calmly at each other. Daredevil, clutching his shattered ribs, tried to struggle to his feet to continue fighting, but a rifle was pressed against his forehead. Any movement would instantly rip open his skull. Sorry, Daredevil. Oh no, I should call you Attorney Matthew. You're a good man, Bai Ye said in a low, expressionless voice, but unfortunately, you're in my way. You know me. Matthew stared in shock at the man before him. This man not only knew his blindness but also knew his identity. In response, Bai Ye fired 2 shots into Matthew's right hand and left leg. The pain made Matthew groan, and the baton he was holding rolled to the side. Bai Ye bent down to pick up the baton, tossed it aside, and then threatened, "Of course I know you. I know not only the firm you work for, but also all your family. Sorry, I forgot your father is dead. You're like me now, without family, only friends left. Don't worry, you're a good person. I don't want to kill you. I just hope you won't keep bothering me. Have a good love-hate relationship with Kingpin, your nemesis among street heroes. Otherwise, if I encounter you again and you meddle in my business, I believe Kingpin will be interested in your true identity. After all, Daredevil's true identity is far more valuable than a mere $1 million in the bank, don't you think?" Bai Ye said calmly, then, leaning on his baton, limped to his car, stepped on the gas, and sped away, leaving Daredevil standing there, bewildered. In the car, Bai Ye's previously tense expression suddenly twitched as he felt the pain all over his body from the recoil of that kick, especially the severe cracks in his legs. The ache was unbearable. Damn, that Daredevil's physique is too good. No wonder he's a superhero who can fight and withstand anything. He didn't die from my kick, which was enhanced with my internal energy. His 1.4 physique is terrifying, Bai Ye exclaimed, looking at the data on his attribute panel. Name, Bai Ye. Lifespan, 18/120 strength, 1.4 plus 0.2 constitution, 1.3 plus spirit, 1.4 plus charisma, 1.4 plus unused attribute points, 0.3 description. An attack has been detected. Analyzing opponent's data. Name, Matthew Michael Murdoch. Strength, 1.4 agility, 1.4 constitution, 1.4 spirit, 2.9 charisma, 1.2. You have equipped 0.2 unused attribute points in strength, resulting in an actual strength of 1.4. With an additional 0.2 strength points equipped, your apparent strength is 1.6. Looking at Matthew's stats, Bai Ye couldn't help but sigh. After these days of investigation, he realized that the physical limit of an ordinary person should be around 1.4, while Daredevil is a monster who has reached the human limit in strength, speed, and constitution. Especially considering that although the opponent was blind, his mental stat was 2.9, and his reaction speed was even sharper than Bai Ye's, who could see. Combined with his skillful fighting techniques, if Bai Ye hadn't caught him off guard, he would have been worn down by Bai Ye's kiting tactics. Feeling the pain in his body, Bai Ye drove according to his memory to a pile of rocks in the suburbs. He then stuffed the money from the sack in the car into a hole and blocked it with stones. After driving more than 10 kilometers away, he discarded his mask, clothes, and rifle, and dragged his body, which was almost at its limit, on foot for several kilometers until he found a deserted forest to hide in. Damn it, robbery is easy, but the cleanup is hard. I'll never do this kind of shit again, Bai Ye complained, leaning against a tree. Then, gritting his teeth, he climbed to the treetop with his bare hands and began doing pull-ups with one hand. Yes, pull-ups. He wanted to test his new idea, and if he could just raise his physique to 1.4, his injuries would heal without medicine, saving him attribute points. In the wilderness, Bai Ye endured the intense pain in his legs, gripping a tree trunk with his right arm and doing one-handed push-ups. He had to raise his physique to 1.4 tonight, then go to school pretending nothing was wrong, thus clearing himself of suspicion. 10, 100, 1000. While exceeding his strength limit burdened his physique, the bonus was terrifying. Each movement significantly reduced his stamina consumption. Bai Ye did 1001 arm pull-ups before feeling any soreness in his arm. 1345, 1346, 1347. Bai Ye gritted his teeth, bending his right arm upwards, feeling the muscles expand, the internal energy surging from his dantian relieving the pain in his arm. After completing 1984 pull-ups with one hand, Bai Ye, unable to hold on any longer, gripped the tree trunk with his left arm, letting his right arm relax naturally. The next second, a new message appeared in the description: you completed a total of 1984 one-arm pull-ups while injured, repeating 35,124 times. Your body has suffered 0.12% long-term damage. This will recover on its own when your constitution reaches 1.5. Repeating 5 times will increase your strength cap by 0.1. Repeating 1 time will increase your constitution cap by 0.1. Repeating 2 times will increase your spirit cap by 0.1. Just as I thought, Bai Ye's eyes lit up. Just 5 repetitions were enough to increase his strength cap from 1.6 by 0.1. Clearly, the increased attribute points weren't added to his base attributes but were counted as equipment points. In other words, when his actual strength was 1.4, he received an additional 0.2 strength. When his actual strength was 200, he also received an additional 0.2 strength. This can be understood as the attribute value being the next level's value, but the experience gained for leveling up remained unchanged. I feel like I can take off. Seeing his guess come true, all of Bai Ye's gloom vanished, and he couldn't help but burst into laughter. Who could resist such joy? Thinking this, Bai Ye's fighting spirit soared even higher. He gripped the tree trunk tightly with his left arm and resumed his workout. 2 hours later, you have completed a total of 1,145 double arm sit-ups, increasing your physique attribute cap to 1.4. As the new data appeared in the description, a series of cracking sounds rang out from all over Bai Ye's body. His cracked leg bone, and all the misaligned muscles and bones throughout his body, were all healed with these sounds. With his body restored to perfect condition, Bai Ye braced himself with his arms, performed a sharp somersault in the air, and landed smoothly. After stretching his now perfectly adjusted body, Bai Ye looked towards his home, still more than 20 kilometers away. He took a deep breath and started walking towards home. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, in the pitch-black moonlight, Bai Ye was like a ghost of the night. A series of wind sounds swept past Bai Ye's ears, and one scene after another was overtaken by him. His speeding body began to feel the resistance brought by the air. Chapter 14: Cultivating both inner and outer strength. Late at night, the quiet NYPD was awakened by an emergency call, and a large number of officers drove towards the bank where the incident occurred. Because the bank wasn't far from the station, the entire journey, from receiving the call to arriving, took only about 10 minutes. Chief George, in his uniform, arrived shortly after and looked at the officers cordoning off the scene. "What's the situation inside?" Reporting. "Chief, the entire gang that detonated the explosives has been apprehended, but the situation at the scene is a bit strange," an officer said, his expression slightly odd. Hearing that the entire criminal gang had been captured, George's expression relaxed slightly, then he asked, "Tell me the details." According to the confessions of the criminal gang, during the robbery of the bank vault, another person appeared, not only taking all the cash and documents they had stolen, but also shooting through the ankles of the bomb makers, and then driving away, the officer reported. "You mean, although the gang that made the bomb has been caught, the money in the bank vault was still stolen by another supervillain?" George's face darkened. Thinking about the overwhelming reports in the newspapers about the police's dereliction of duty, he felt a headache coming on. It was indeed asking too much of ordinary police officers to deal with such a supercriminal. Meanwhile, Bai Ye, having recovered his strength through improved physical conditioning, sped home in just over half an hour. After a busy night, it was already 1 a.m., but the night's achievements were remarkable. He had obtained over 1 million yuan in stolen money, and in terms of strength, he had figured out the characteristics of the attributes he was about to use. If it weren't for today's events, he might have kept hoarding them, only to use 0.1 of the attribute sometime in the future, wasting a lot of time. Running over 20 kilometers, even Bai Ye was somewhat exhausted. After quickly taking off his soaked clothes and catching his breath, he sat cross-legged on the ground and began to cultivate the purple cloud true key within his danshin. In less than 10 minutes, Bai Ye condensed a wisp of purple cloud true key, more than 200% faster than when his initial physique was only 1.2. Clearly, physique was indeed linked to talent. Moreover, this talent wasn't even mentioned in the Gentleman's Sword's annotations on the purple cloud divine skill, because his talent and cultivation speed had already surpassed all previous practitioners of the purple cloud divine skill. After a brief period of cultivation, confirming the improvement in his talent, Bai Ye withdrew from his cultivation posture and began training. He planned to break through to both strength and spirit that very night. In the pitch black, Bai Ye expressionlessly carried tables and chairs, soaking them in diluted sulfuric acid for weight training. Today's encounter with the robbery gang in Daredevil had really spurred him on. It seemed his long period of peaceful life had made him forget that this was the perilous Marvel world. In Marvel, an ordinary person might be bullied by supervillains, while a bad guy might face off against a multitude of superheroes. Here, only power could bring him peace of mind. Only by becoming strong enough that good people feared he would turn bad, and bad people feared he would turn good, could he find tranquility. When you become so powerful that no one can rival you, you will find yourself surrounded by smiling faces that fawn over you. And so, in silent training, the entire night quietly passed. When the sunlight streamed through the window the next day, Bai Ye's stats had subtly changed. Name, Bai Ye. Lifespan, 18/150 strength, 1.5 plus 0.2 constitution, 1.4 plus spirit, 1.5 plus charisma, 1.4 plus available attribute points. 0.3 description, you completed a total of 1,642 weighted push-ups, spirit attribute plus 0.1. You completed a total of 1,643 weighted squats, strength attribute plus 0.1. You equipped 0.2 attribute points in strength, your actual strength is 1.5, and with an additional 0.2 strength value equipped, your apparent strength is 1.7. Bai Ye silently stood up, gently clenching his fist. With a base strength of 1.5 and 0.2 available attribute points, his strength far exceeded his constitution attribute. In daily life, this was fine, but in combat, his body would still collapse from overexertion, just like when he fought Daredevil. Not only constitution, but a spirit lower than strength might lead to imperfect body control during combat, or his speed exceeding his reaction time. Only a balanced development of all three was the optimal strategy. Should I add points to my constitution attribute? Bai Ye hesitated for a moment. After all, the attribute points were too precious to waste, and adding them rashly might be a waste. After much deliberation, Bai Ye temporarily abandoned the idea of adding points and took out food from the refrigerator to start chewing. 10 minutes later, after finishing breakfast, Bai Ye poured a little sulfuric acid from a glass bottle into a glass filled with water, stirring constantly as he poured. When he felt it was ready, Bai Ye grabbed the diluted sulfuric acid in front of him and poured it into his mouth without hesitation. As the diluted sulfuric acid entered his mouth, a faint sour taste filled his mouth, and the warm liquid went down into his stomach. After drinking it, Bai Ye smacked his lips to savor the taste. There was a slight sweetness and a slightly oily feeling. Yes, in Bai Ye's understanding, swallowing sulfuric acid was a way to cultivate both internal and external strength. After drinking the diluted sulfuric acid in one gulp, he got up and prepared to head towards the school. He had originally planned to skip school yesterday, but since he had robbed a bank robber and then beaten up Daredevil last night, he needed to make a name for himself and appear innocent. The journey was silent. Unlike before, Bai Ye, feeling guilty, dared not run at full speed. With his current strength attribute of 1.7, his running speed would definitely make passers-by mistake him for a mutant, so he deliberately got up early and slowly made his way to school. However, compared to before, his slower pace today seemed to attract more trouble. "Hello, what can I do for you?" Bai Ye asked the woman in front of him with a smile, but inwardly he was wary, suspecting something was amiss. Otherwise, why would this girl wait until after he committed a crime to block his way instead of coming to him first? The girl looked up at Bai Ye, her face immediately flushing, and said in an almost murmured voice, "My name is Alice, and I want to be friends with you, Bai Ye." Huh? Bai Ye stared speechlessly at the woman in front of him. He had thought there was some kind of trap, but it turned out she was just after his body. Glancing at the girl whose charm rating was estimated at only 1.1, Bai Ye, without any immediate attraction, politely declined, "Sorry, I have a girlfriend. She doesn't want me to have too much contact with other men." After sending the dejected girl away, Bai Ye realized he was indeed a bit too handsome. On his way to school, he had already been stopped 5 or 6 times, and the people stopping him were both men and women. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15. When are we all going to get together offline? Late at night, in a post-apocalyptic world, a young man in his 20s stared anxiously ahead. He could see a virtual panel, visible only to him in this world. At the top of the panel was a large line of text, "All Heavens Exchange Group." This young man was the omniscient and omnipotent immortal who had blocked Bai Ye in the administrator group. Just now, having gained administrator privileges, he received a message: 3 members in the exchange group have reached level 1, qualifying for advancement. Upgrade the chat group to 20 members. The young man's face lit up with joy. The group's level was linked to the members' strength. Reaching level 1 meant exceeding human limits in destructive power, or at least some aspect of physical ability. Before this, only the young man and Spider-Gwen, the gentleman's sword, had reached level 1 in the entire exchange group. The worlds of the others were basically unremarkable. He was genuinely curious about who had reached level 1. Opening the chat group members list, his face darkened the next second, because a large number 1 was displayed at the top of the dark blue list. How could it be him? How could it possibly be him? The young man muttered to himself, utterly unable to accept it. Wasn't I supposed to have him muted? How could he have reached level 1 so quickly? Could it be that the world he transmigrated to is some kind of advanced world? Suddenly, something occurred to him. He immediately began browsing the file directory, and then, seeing the download count for the file Purple Cloud Divine Skill increase from 5 to 6, his eyes narrowed. He thought to himself, no wonder. It seems this fellow villager is a martial arts prodigy. Looks like I need to think of other methods. I must eliminate this unstable factor as soon as possible, the young man muttered to himself, glancing at the chat group's upgrade bar and choosing to abandon the upgrade, deciding to consider it again after eliminating Deep Blue. Before waving away from the chat group, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the chat group's level introduction before his omniscient and omnipotent self. After a walk and rejecting 5 or 6 suitors, Bai Ye finally arrived at the classroom before class. As the classroom bell rang, Bai Ye saw James, the biology teacher, walk into the classroom. After glancing at the class, he said, "Just a reminder before class, tomorrow's Osborne visit spots are very valuable. I hope you all take it seriously and that no one is absent." When he mentioned absent, James specifically glanced at Bai Ye in the back row. Seeing Bai Ye's completely distracted expression, he sighed helplessly and continued the lesson. At that moment, Bai Ye was hunched over his desk, his backpack slung over his back, his buttocks seemingly sitting on the chair, but actually with a 2 to 3 millimeter gap between them and the chair. His legs were firmly planted in a horse stance. A churning pain was shooting through his abdomen. After settling for a while, the diluted sulfuric acid was now taking effect in his intestines, corroding them. Even with a constitution of 1.4, he hadn't surpassed the limits of the human body. Even diluted sulfuric acid was too much for his fragile internal organs to withstand. Experiencing the excruciating pain, Bai Ye's lips were pale with agony. To alleviate his pain, he half listened to the teacher's lecture while checking the chat group to see what the other members were talking about. He then noticed a new member named Crimson Eyes had joined. Looking at Crimson Eyes' profile, Bai Ye realized this person was a level 4 member. Through observing the group and reviewing its files over the past few days, he understood that level represented strength, making him arguably the strongest member besides the omniscient and omnipotent immortal whose level was invisible. At this moment, Crimson Eyes wasn't putting on airs at all. Instead, he was friendly and approachable, communicating with every member in a pleasant manner. However, as Bai Ye watched, something felt off. He noticed the member was very manipulative in his conversations. He kept asking how they had arrived in their respective worlds and subtly hinting that they should gather together to verify the differences between the worlds. Crimson I just asked the omniscient and omnipotent immortal, and he said that as long as the members agree, they can come to each other's worlds. Everyone in the group seems very friendly, so why don't we meet offline? Group member Crimson I sent a cross-world application to the group members. Looking at the application sent by Crimson I, Bai Ye checked it. Even those who were banned could go to that world if they accepted the invitation. Faced with such a powerful request, most people chose to accept the invitation, leaving only the omniscient and omnipotent immortal and Bai Ye without clicking accept. This can't be a trap, can it? Bai Ye was full of suspicion. The behavior of this Crimson Lord was too strange, so he couldn't help but be suspicious. Regardless of whether it was a trap or not, Bai Ye refused the invitation without hesitation. After he refused, in a certain apocalyptic world, the young man's face stiffened slightly, and then returned to normal. Looking at the group members around him who were curiously looking at their surroundings, the young man knew that his plan had failed again. At school, Bai Ye stayed quietly all day. When evening came, as usual, he greeted Peter and then ran to the gym. Upon arriving at the gym, Coach Smith had already been waiting for quite some time. Seeing Bai Ye approach, he waved and said, "You didn't come all day yesterday? Did something happen?" "Nothing, just a little thing that kept me from coming," Bai Ye replied, unwilling to elaborate. Was he supposed to tell Smith that he'd gone to rob a bank yesterday? Having wasted a day, Bai Ye was now impatient. "Let's get started. Let's begin with weightlifting, starting with 200 pounds. 200 pounds? Smith's face stiffened. Looking at the young man who appeared to be a mutant, he realized that in just one day, he had already improved so much. Did he have no limit? However, he didn't say anything. Having witnessed Bai Ye's extraordinary abilities, he didn't ask any further questions. Their usual discussions were only about how to better train different muscle groups. Smith never commented on things like mutants or superheroes. Bai Ye, pleased with his attitude, no longer suppressed his uniqueness and became increasingly unrestrained in the private gym. When she first started practicing the Xixia divine skill, she was hiding it from Smith, but after seeing how well he was doing, she stopped hiding it and started circulating her internal energy to practice the Xixia divine skill in front of him. Chapter 16 Smith's Book Writing Plan. You performed a total of 312 weighted squats. Repeating 21 times increases maximum strength by 0.1. Repeating 5 times increases maximum constitution by 0.1. Repeating 19 times increases maximum spirit by 0.1. At 10 p.m., Bai Ye wiped the sweat from his forehead, put down the 300-plus pound weight beside him, and looked at the information displayed on the progress bar. With an additional 0.2 increase in strength, the efficiency of his training was indeed several times faster than before. He had only trained for 4 or 5 hours that evening, and was almost at the level to level up. "That's enough for today," Bai Ye said, straightening up and turning to Smith. Smith's expression was numb with surprise. Hearing Bai Ye's words, he asked, "Not training anymore? 5 hours today, it's okay. You guys are about to leave? I'll go home and continue training. I'll come back after school tomorrow, just like today," Bai Ye said, too lazy to shower in the gym's shower room since he was covered in sweat. He figured he'd just keep sweating after training, so he simply put on his clothes and turned to go home. Watching Bai Ye leave the gym, Smith looked away, already anticipating Bai Ye's arrival tomorrow. He wondered if Bai Ye would surprise him again like today, and if his physical condition would improve even further after a night of training. Smith was filled with mixed feelings. As Bai Ye's fitness coach, seeing Bai Ye's increasingly muscular physique, he began to believe that his client was destined for greatness, one day soaring to great heights. But whether that soaring to great heights would be for good or bad was uncertain. Given the current level of hostility towards mutants and public opinion, and considering his client's somewhat difficult personality, it seemed likely he'd eventually side with the Brotherhood of Mutants, a terrorist organization composed of mutants. Of course, Smith didn't want this outcome. He planned to be proactive and help Bai Ye rise to power, even starting to write a diary these days. This way, regardless of Bai Ye's future, he could publish a book based on the diary and make money. If Bai Ye joined the Brotherhood, he'd write a book called My Mutant Client, analyzing Bai Ye's inner thoughts and how he turned bad. If Bai Ye joined an official organization, he could rewrite it as My Mutant Brother, showering Bai Ye with praise. No matter Bai Ye's future path, it was a win-win situation, like Qin Shi Huang looking in a mirror. Leaving Smith's daydreams aside, Bai Ye calmly returned home and prepared to train, aiming to reach a physique of 1.5 that night, breaking through his physical limits. According to the description in the instructions, any long-term injury can be healed once the constitution reaches 1.5. It seems that once the constitution reaches 1.5, the healing ability will experience a qualitative leap. Having just taken off his shirt and hung it aside, Bai Ye lifted the wardrobe with both hands, ready to exercise, when his phone suddenly rang. Puzzled, he gently put the wardrobe down and walked to the table. Seeing the unfamiliar number on the screen, and with a certain suspicion, Bai Ye pressed the call button. "Hey Bai, are you short on cash lately? I'm planning to land another big job. If I complete it, I'll give you 10% of the profits." A hoarse but cheerful voice came from the other end of the line. Hearing the voice on the phone, Bai Ye was silent for a moment, then said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Uncle Lee, I already said before that I'm not doing this kind of thing anymore." The person on the other end paused, seemingly thinking about something, then repeated, "Bai, are you really sure you're quitting? You were born for this. After you left, none of those young men amounted to anything. I was even thinking of having you take over for me." Hearing this, Bai Ye insisted, "Uncle Lee, I'm really sorry. I already said before that I just want to focus on my studies now. Aren't you really going to reconsider? Studying those lousy books is nowhere near as comfortable as being in the underworld. One job can easily earn you more than a year's salary." The tone on the other end of the phone became incredibly regretful. "After your gambling-addicted parents died, if it weren't for Uncle taking you in, you would have been sold to a nightclub as a gigolo long ago. But with your figure, even being a gigolo would be more promising than studying. I've thought it through, Uncle Lee. I'll hang up now, I have something to do," Bai Ye said, hanging up the phone expressionlessly, then sneered. He knew very well that his parents were originally doing quite well in New York. The reason they became addicted to gambling and took out high-interest loans was all orchestrated by this fellow countryman from Chinatown, Uncle Lee. And if he hadn't been a bit clever, the result would indeed have been as Uncle Lee said, young, destitute, and with no assets but his good looks. He would definitely have been sold into gigolo. It's just that the person who sold him and counted the money behind the scenes was also Uncle Lee on the other end of the phone. Over the years, he had helped Uncle Lee do shady work and gradually paid off the loans his parents had owed, which allowed him to escape. As for why he had to escape, although he hadn't regained his memories of his past life, he still understood very clearly. In a place teeming with mutants, continuing to work in the underworld could lead to your entire family being slaughtered in a heartbeat if you offended some ruthless individual. After hanging up the phone, Bai Ye didn't immediately start exercising. Instead, he began to think about how to launder the money he had robbed. He had initially planned to use Uncle Lee as a connection, having them launder the money directly, so Bai Ye could get the money, and Uncle Lee could take about 10% commission. However, to Bai Ye's surprise, Uncle Lee called first, asking him to get involved in the underworld again. After refusing, he certainly couldn't ask Uncle Lee to launder the money. This wasn't out of embarrassment, but rather a suspicion of Uncle Lee's integrity. He feared Uncle Lee would launder all his ill-gotten gains, leaving him either to suffer in silence or to work for him again for the money. Bai Ye sighed slightly. Since this method wasn't feasible, he had to find another way. With funds tight, he needed to process the money as soon as possible. With these new questions in mind, Bai Ye picked up the cabinet again and resumed his training. Improving himself was more reliable than any other plan, so he would give up cultivating the purple cloud divine art tonight. As long as he could reach a physique level of 1.5 by tomorrow, the time saved by the increased aptitude resulting from the improved physique should be enough to easily make up for the training he missed tonight. Chapter 17 Undercurrents. The New York night was brightly lit. In a hospital ward in the city center, a handsome man wearing sunglasses, his right hand and left leg bandaged, lay on the bed. This man was Matthew, the daredevil whose arms and legs had been broken by a white knight's rifle the previous night. Now, he gripped a charcoal pencil with his intact left hand, gesturing rapidly across the notebook before him. While drawing as a blind man was somewhat unbelievable, Matthew's senses were far beyond those of ordinary people. He could generate the shapes of objects in his mind simply from the echoes of sounds, making him even more dexterous than sighted people in daily life. With a scratching sound of the charcoal pencil across the paper, until the last stroke, the image of a handsome, almost otherworldly-looking man of about 18 years old appeared on the paper. After finishing, Matthew put down the pencil, still utterly bewildered by the scene from the previous night. Who is this guy? Why does he know my identity and weaknesses so well? Remembering what Bai Ye had said last night, that if anyone dared to continue probing his identity, he would reveal it to Kingpin, Matthew felt a chill run down his spine. The feeling that his own life and the lives of his close friends were in someone else's hands was truly unsettling. Just as Matthew hesitated about whether to continue investigating Bai Ye's whereabouts, he heard a noise outside the ward. Judging from the voice, he knew it was his friend Amy from his firm, bringing a flower basket to visit him. With a click, the door lock was pressed, and Amy quickly entered, asking with concern, "I heard you got caught in the crossfire of a gang fight last night. How badly are you hurt?" "It's alright. The doctor said I'm in good physical condition and will recover quickly, but I probably won't be able to work for a month," Matthew said with a smile. Amy breathed a sigh of relief. "It's good that you're alright. The security situation has been getting worse lately, and we're almost overwhelmed. We're just waiting for you to recover so we can help us." As she spoke, her sharp eyes noticed a piece of paper lying face down on the table beside the bed. "Hey, what's that?" Amy picked it up and looked at the sketch on the paper. Her eyes lit up. "Who drew this sketch by your bedside? This young man's drawing is so beautiful. Is there a real person in it?" As she spoke, Amy's expression became somewhat strange. Who would give a blind person a portrait? This behavior was a bit too abstract. "Oh, it was drawn by a friend of mine. As for the person in it, it's actually a student he saw on the street. Because he remembered him so well, he drew him on the spot when he got home," Matthew explained with a smile. "You don't recognize him? That's such a pity. I'd like to see the real person. But this must have been beautified. I've never seen anyone so good looking," Amy said with a regretful expression. "I'll tell my friend that if I see him next time, I'll exchange contact information and introduce him to you if I have the chance," Matthew said. Then, as if remembering something, he subtly added, "I overheard the family members in the next bed talking about whether another bank has been robbed recently." "That's right, it's caused quite a stir. Our entire firm is discussing it. Last night, a gang robbed the vault of Terry Bank. They even blew it open, but then a supervillain appeared and double-crossed them, taking all the loot along with their car. When the police arrived, they only caught a gang members. They were all shot in the ankles and couldn't escape. As for the supervillain, after a whole night of searching, they only found his abandoned car. Because of this, it was all over the headlines this morning, and the police have lost face quite a bit." At this point, Amy suddenly raised a finger and said, "Hey, by the way, I heard that the police station is going to hold a public briefing tomorrow morning." "A public briefing?" Matthew asked curiously, also knowing who the guy who lost the cash was. Amy nodded and explained, "That's right. After all, there haven't been any bank robberies in New York for a long time, and with all the talk about it, they definitely need to hold a briefing to reassure New Yorkers." "Is that so? It seems the NYPD is really taking this seriously this time," Matthew nodded. After chatting with Amy for a while longer, seeing that it was getting late, they agreed to meet again the next morning. Meanwhile, at the NYPD commissioner's home, George, looking at the negative comments about the police department online, felt his hair turn several strands white. As an ordinary person in a chaotic international metropolis like New York City, he had only risen to the position of commissioner through years of diligent work. But anyone with eyes could see that these police officers were fine dealing with ordinary criminals, but when faced with superhumans, mutants, vampires, and other extraordinary beings, simply surviving was already a feat. He had asked his superiors countless times if they could send down some kind of superpowered police force, otherwise, it would be too passive for them to only be able to pray for supervigilantes to solve any major incidents. But these requests were always brushed off, with excuses given that the military's research project based on the super soldier serum had been forced to halt recently because a test subject escaped from the base during the experiment, causing the experiment to be temporarily suspended. The military was currently conducting a full-scale manhunt, and they would have to wait a little longer. Regardless, relying on caution and a clear understanding of their own capabilities, they had managed to patch things up over the years. Compared to other major cities, New York City's annual police casualty rate was only 5%, which was already quite remarkable. Thinking about the press conference he was to attend the next morning, he rehearsed his speech one last time before bed, then listlessly declined his wife's invitation and fell asleep, exhausted. I should launder the money as soon as possible, Bai Ye thought to himself as he exercised in the bedroom. His finances had become increasingly tight lately, and he needed to legalize his funds as soon as possible. Just as Bai Ye was thinking this, several men with fierce appearances and large, muscular bodies sat together in a warehouse. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, the police will start their press conference. There will be many officers there then. That will be the time when the police force is at its weakest. Then, we just need to do the opposite, and we can carry out the operation fully armed, a scarred man said. So, brother, which bank should we rob? Another man asked. Lancashire Bank, of course. I've done thorough research. This bank has the most abundant cash reserves in all of New York City. But the security isn't very strict, the scarred man said. But at this moment, they overlooked a crucial question. Why was the security so lax at this bank with so much money? Chapter 18 The Bank Meets the Bank. In the early morning, sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the headboard. As the alarm rang, Bai Ye's half-closed eyes snapped open, and he reached out to turn it off. After several hours of effort the previous night, his physique attribute had successfully increased to 1.5, meaning all three of his attributes had broken human limits. Bai Ye's current base stats were as follows: name, Bai Ye, lifespan, 18/200, strength, 1.5 plus 0.2, physique, 1.5 plus, spirit, 1.5 plus, charisma, 1.4 plus, available attribute points, 0.3. With his physique reaching 1.5, his lifespan had also been extended to over 200 years. A few more years, and he could live for another American history. As for other characteristics of his physique, Bai Ye discovered that as his training ended, the descriptions of long-term damage from the number of training sessions completely disappeared, leaving only the description of how many training sessions could improve his physical attributes by 0.1. After getting up and gently stretching his body, Bai Ye quickly washed up, opened the refrigerator, took out some food, and slowly chewed. Today, he still needed to go out and deal with that illicit money issue. As for the school-arranged visit to the Osborne group, he could just skip class. Studying? Forget about it. As his physical abilities improved, Bai Ye began to realize that he was becoming increasingly indifferent to things beyond strength, or rather, he was better able to prioritize. In the face of pure violence, everything else had to give way. Huh? Bai Ye suddenly let out a soft "huh" while eating, curiously touching his stomach, a feeling of fullness spreading through his abdomen. Why is my appetite smaller today? Looking at the unfinished food in his hand, Bai Ye was puzzled. In the past few days, due to the excessive training and improved physique, his appetite had grown day by day, and he felt hungry frequently. Coupled with his unwillingness to deprive himself, his daily food expenditure was enormous. But now, he felt that his appetite was only half of what it had been yesterday morning. Is it because of improved physique? Is the enhanced stomach more efficient at utilizing food? Bai Ye could only guess. He casually ate the half-eaten food in front of him, put the rest in the refrigerator, and prepared to leave. Meanwhile, at 9 o'clock in the morning, students from Midtown High School boarded the school bus one by one before the designated time. Where's Bai Ye? He didn't come again. Teacher James looked at the students on the bus, and sure enough, he didn't see that conspicuous figure in the crowd. He looked at Peter on the bus. Peter Parker shook his head helplessly, indicating he didn't know either. James repeated himself, and after confirming that he really hadn't come, he felt helpless about this self-indulgent student. He said to the students on the bus, "Everyone sit down, we're going to Osborne." After gesturing to the driver, the school bus slowly started moving towards its destination. Just as the bus was heading towards Osborne, Bai Ye had already arrived at the pile of rubble where he had previously hidden the accounts. He easily moved the half-ton stone above the cave, revealing a pile full of gold and silver notes. Opening his briefcase, Bai Ye, having had ample time, rummaged through the contents, ultimately taking only a portion of the cash and gold before moving the stone back to its original position. He placed the cash in the briefcase, picked up the gold, and then forcefully squeezed it with both hands. Under immense force, the gold bars, originally marked with a bank's logo, gradually deformed under Bai Ye's kneading, eventually forming a large, irregularly shaped ball. After stuffing this gold ball into the briefcase full of cash, Bai Ye headed towards Lancashire Bank in New York. He chose this bank because those with experience in both the legal and illegal worlds of New York knew that it was backed by the mutant organization Brotherhood, essentially a Marvel version of the Continental Hotel. Depositing money here meant no one would investigate the source of your funds. As long as you deposited money and paid a 15% handling fee, they would soon notify you that you had regained the remaining 85% of the amount through legitimate means, such as winning the lottery or gambling. As for the illicit money deposited in the bank, it naturally disappeared from the account after a period of time. For a long time, due to fear of the power of the Brotherhood of Mutants, a terrorist organization, the government has turned a blind eye to this bank. As long as it doesn't go too far, no trouble will come knocking. Bai Ye walked into the bank with his suitcase, looking calm. Seeing that there were customers at the 3 windows ahead of him, he silently found the window with the fewest people and waited. A few minutes later, it was finally Bai Ye's turn. He walked forward with his suitcase, placed it on the table, and whispered to the customer service representative, "Open an anonymous account for cleanup." The customer service representative, initially attracted by Bai Ye's appearance, immediately smiled knowingly and said, "Please leave any bank card number. The remaining money will be transferred to your card in 1 to 3 business days." Bai Ye nodded and was about to take out his bank card when his keen hearing detected a large group of people rushing in from outside. Then, bank robbery. "Everyone, lie down immediately and don't move, or my gun might go off," a tyrannical voice echoed through the hall. Unlike the others who were shocked, Bai Ye was completely stunned. Did this guy not know where he was? What kind of power did he have? Was he a Saiyan or Superman, daring to rob a place like this? And this was already the second bank robbery he'd encountered in New York. Completely bewildered, Bai Ye looked at the customer service representative and asked, "Is this a drill at your bank?" Seeing the customer service representative's terrified face, Bai Ye knew he'd probably encountered a fool. "What are you standing there for? Quickly put your hands behind your head and lie down. What's in the suitcase? Open it now." The robber behind him pressed a submachine gun against Bai Ye's back, his tone incredibly arrogant. Glancing at the bank's security cameras, which had clearly recorded his entire entry, Bai Ye had no choice but to abandon his plan to kill the group. He obediently stepped aside, hands behind his head, allowing the robber to open the suitcase. Seeing the suitcase full of cash and a gold ball larger than an egg, the robber's eyes practically popped out. He immediately shouted, "Boss, come take a look, this kid's pretty rich." Bai Ye rolled his eyes, showing no fear of being kidnapped. He obediently walked out of the customer service area and then stayed with the others, trying to minimize his presence. Chapter 19 Professional Team. Inside a New York bank that morning, chaos reigned. Panic gripped everyone's faces as they faced the heavily armed robbers. Of course, not everyone was afraid. Bai Ye observed the expressions of the people in the bank. Besides himself, there was another man who remained calm, his right hand instinctively reaching for his waist, likely another gangster there on business. "Hurry up and take the money, be quick," Bai Ye prayed silently, huddled with the hostages, his hands covering his head. He wasn't worried about losing his money. After all, this wasn't just stealing his money, it was slapping mutants in the face. If these people got away with it, this bank affiliated with the Brotherhood would lose all its credibility. In the underworld, long-term business relies on reputation. Even terrorists have to keep their word. If they say they'll kill someone, their entire family will be executed. Bai Ye was certain that once the robbers left the bank, the mutants who felt offended would find them that very night, grind them to dust, and then return the stolen money in full. Therefore, he actually hoped these hotheads would quickly finish the robbery and leave, making the situation easier to resolve. "Hurry up, hand over all the cash and receipts in the bank right now, cooperate obediently, and don't press the alarm, or I'll kill you," one of the robbers threatened, pointing a submachine gun at the teller. Just as the robbers spoke, gunshots rang out inside the bank, eliciting screams. The security guard who tried to draw his gun in the shadows to retaliate was immediately shot multiple times and collapsed to the ground. One of the robbers, who had fired the shots, clutched his bleeding waist and howled in pain. Scott, seeing his companion shot, the robber who had been pointing the gun at the customer service representative immediately cried out in concern, then rushed over, abandoning his robbery to anxiously check on his partner's injuries. "Eris, go get customer service to open the vault. We don't have much time," the hostage taker urged. "I'm not going to rob the money anymore. Let's go, I'll take you to the hospital now," Eris, the hostage taker, said, ignoring Scott's pleas and supporting him. "Don't worry about me, hurry up and rob the money. My injury isn't fatal, the money is more important," the other hostage taker said, clutching his wound in pain. Bai Ye, who had been watching the whole thing, was dumbfounded. How could he encounter such a weirdo? "Dude, this is a bank robbery. Does he think this is a melodramatic soap opera? Are they going to rob the money or not?" After some hesitation, these people finally started to rob the bank methodically. One side held the bank manager hostage and opened the vault, while the other side went to rob the cash on the counter. But watching their reckless actions, Bai Ye's blood pressure rose. The hostage taker at the counter, completely unsuspecting, simply took all the cash stored inside at once. Some banks install alarms under the cash counters to trigger police immediately after a robbery. Experienced gangs usually place a few sheets of paper under the cash when withdrawing money. Now, needless to say, the police have received word from these idiots and are preparing to dispatch officers. Here, the robbers are still completely oblivious to the situation. Led by the manager, they open the vault, their eyes gleaming at the sight of the overflowing cash, gold, bills, and piles of valuables. Little do they know, the valuables in the vault are all goods stored by various gangs. Robbing the vault now is tantamount to directly offending half of the New York underworld. The last person to dare do this wouldn't even have a decent organ left. Sure enough, while these men were frantically searching for money, after a series of idiotic actions, in less than 3 minutes, before they had even filled the sacks with money, a burst of sirens blared outside the bank, and 7 or 8 police cars immediately surrounded the area. "Boss, we're surrounded by the police," one of the robbers said in a panic. "Damn it, wasn't the police supposed to be holding a press conference today? How come they're here so fast?" the robber leader roared angrily. "Damn," Bai Ye, hiding in the crowd, rolled his eyes. So that's why these guys chose this time to strike. Although he'd been so engrossed in working out lately that he didn't know about this press conference, a little common sense told him, did his boss give his employees a day off just because he held a press conference? New York City covers over 1,000 square kilometers, with 77 police precincts and over 30,000 officers. What were these guys thinking? Did they do any research? This wasn't just an amateur team. Besides their excellent marksmanship and muscular physiques, Bai Ye suspected their brains were completely dominated by muscles. At this point, Bai Ye had completely resigned himself to his fate, just squatting to the side watching these 6 or 7 robbers put on their show. With his current physical condition, if he didn't want to be exposed, killing these guys would be a piece of cake. He wasn't afraid at all. "People inside, come out. You're surrounded. Drop your weapons and surrender," the police outside shouted through a megaphone, their repeated urging making the robbers' faces grim. "Boss, what do we do?" one of the robbers, his face pale behind his mask, asked. "Talk to them. Tell them to get us a van, then we'll leave with a hostage," the gang leader said, his gaze sweeping over the customers crouching in the corner, his eyes immediately taking a liking to Bai Ye. "You, come here," the leader said, pointing a submachine gun at Bai Ye. Me, Bai Ye was taken aback, not expecting to be involved, but still obediently got up and walked out. "Yes, you'll be the hostage. Stand at the door and negotiate with them. We'll be behind you with guns pointed at you. If you try to run away, we'll shoot," the leader assured Bai Ye, looking at his face. "Oh," Bai Ye nodded. Being a hostage was just a matter of being a hostage. Meanwhile, on a building in Times Square, New York, reporters from various newspapers gathered, each armed with cameras and microphones, staring at director George on the stage and bombarding him with a barrage of pointed questions. Knowing the nature of these media outlets and having memorized his answers the night before, George responded fluently. But the next moment, the deputy director rushed up from the side, hurriedly whispering a few words in George's ear. "What? Lansure Bank in New York was robbed too?" George asked, barely managing to confirm. The reporter's eyes lit up instantly. Click, 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 countless cameras snapped photos, capturing the frantic images of the director and deputy director on stage in the blinding flash. Chapter 20 Fame. Outside Lansure Bank in New York, a police car pulled up behind the police tape. George got out, sunlight illuminating his face, which was as black as the bottom of a pot. It seemed as if a slight shake of his head would cause coal dust to fall from his skin. Who could have imagined that he'd been preparing a press conference to explain the bank robbery 2 days prior, only to have another robbery announced during the conference? The slap in the face was too quick. At that moment, outside the police tape, a large number of media and onlookers surrounded the police station, and a reporter even had a news helicopter broadcasting the entire incident live. "What's the situation inside? Have the negotiators arrived?" George asked, trying to ignore the gazes of the reporters behind him. The officer in charge of recording reported, "Chief, there are 7 robbers. Some have already died resisting inside. There are now over 20 hostages inside, all facing imminent danger of death. As for the negotiation experts, they won't arrive for a while." Hearing about the casualties, George's expression grew even more serious. "We must contact them immediately." "Have we dialed the bank's hotline?" "Yes, we have. They said they would contact us again and told us to wait," the officer replied. Immediately, the phone rang, and an officer reported, "Chief, they've made a call." "Should we answer it immediately?" "I'll answer it," George sighed. Picking up the phone, he heard a calm male voice on the other end. "Hello, is this the police?" "Find someone of higher rank who can make decisions," George replied without hesitation. "This is George, the New York Police Commissioner. The entire bank is now surrounded. Please lay down your weapons immediately. We can discuss sentencing if you surrender. I'm a hostage. Talking to me like this is useless. Oh, I will open the bank doors as a buffer for the conversation. I have several guns pointed at my back. Any erratic movement will result in immediate death. So please do not take any drastic actions." Inside the bank, Bai Ye stared at the dark gun barrels in front of him, his expression calm, but his muscles were tense to the extreme, ready to erupt at any moment. After all, his current physique wasn't strong enough to withstand bullets, but it didn't matter. As long as he didn't die on the spot, he could use his attribute points to return to his optimal state. "Now, go out and describe our demands to them. If you mess around, we'll kill you," the robber leader said viciously. Bai Ye nodded indifferently, already feeling impatient and having an urge to kill these people, but with a commotion so great, it was even more difficult to act. Under the guns of these people, Bai Ye took the phone to the door, slowly pushed it open, and walked out, only to see police officers, reporters, and onlookers watching from all sides. Outside the bank, the reporters craned their necks, eager to see who would be the first person to emerge. They saw a handsome young Chinese man walk out, his 1.4-point face causing everyone present to gasp involuntarily. George was still on the phone with Bai Ye, but he hadn't expected such a beautiful young man to walk out. However, as a father, he subconsciously noticed something, his brow furrowing slightly as he spoke into the phone. "You're still a student? Isn't today Wednesday?" "Yeah, I skipped class," Bai Ye replied matter-of-factly, leaving George speechless. "Stop talking nonsense. Isn't the priority to get us out of here?" Bai Ye retorted. "Their demand is that you prepare a van immediately, and then they leave with the cash, without being followed. We need some time to consider and prepare," George said. "Of course, no problem. But if you can't do it within an hour, they'll kill one hostage every 5 minutes. I'll start," Bai Ye calmly described the robbers' conversation. "I finished speaking. Is there anything I need to tell them? If not, I'll be leaving," Bai Ye asked. "Please tell them that we will try our best to meet their demands, but we need a little more time. It would be best if we could talk face to face, as this would facilitate communication," George said helplessly. "Okay, I'll pass on what you said, but whether you listen to it or not is none of my business." Bai Ye's nonchalant attitude puzzled George. How could this guy be so calm? "Aren't you afraid of being involved in a robbery?" "There's nothing to be afraid of. Once you meet their demands, I'll be safe," Bai Ye said, turning and walking into the bank. Inside Osborne, under the guidance of teacher James, students were touring this leading global technology company. Just as James was accompanying the guides, his phone suddenly rang. It was their school principal calling. "Hello, principal, what's up?" "I'm currently showing students around Osborne," James said, picking up the phone. "Is Bai Ye with you?" "The Chinese student in your class?" the principal asked sternly on the other end of the line. He skipped class today." "Why are you suddenly asking about him?" James asked curiously. "He was kidnapped from a bank, and it's making headlines across the country," the principal said, looking at the news on the front page of major news websites. "What?" James exclaimed, then, feigning composure, said to the students who were looking at him, "You all continue with the tour. I have something to take care of." Peter Parker, like the other students, watched in bewilderment as James hurriedly left, as if his house were on fire. Above his head, a red and blue spider dangled down on its silk, gently attaching itself to the back of his neck before biting down. Hiss! Peter Parker instinctively slapped his neck, then looked at his palm. A crushed spider carcass lay quietly in his hand. Meanwhile, James borrowed a computer at Osborne, opened a news page, and saw that the headlines of all major American media outlets featured the face of a boy in a black and white striped shirt. That face, wasn't it his student? James didn't know how to describe his feelings at this moment. He continued browsing and found not only photos but also all the video footage after White Knight appeared, and now there were even news helicopters circling around the bank. Chapter 21 Massacre. At this moment, on major American media websites, Bai Ye successfully made it to the front page thanks to his looks and the added bonus of the robbery. So handsome. This is the true love I've been searching for my whole life. Such a great photo, it makes my eyes spin. Damn it, those bastards, playing this kind of imprisonment play, it's so enviable. Why are you all looking at my husband? On the websites, although the incident had only occurred for less than half an hour, it quickly attracted the attention of millions of people, and the whole incident was still escalating, attracting more and more viewers. Returning from the bank, Bai Ye was in a terrible mood. Recalling the crowds outside, he really didn't want to become famous at this time. All told, Bai Ye had only had the panel for less than a week, and he might not even be able to beat Captain America yet. He really didn't want to stand openly under the spotlight. But reality didn't go as planned. The script was written haphazardly, and before he even had time to develop, he'd pulled off this huge stunt. Seeing Bai Ye return, the four robbers who had been aiming at him from behind now surrounded him, all satisfied with his performance. "You've got some nerve, not scared at all," the gang leader looked at Bai Ye and asked, "And your suitcase, with so much cash and a gold ball inside, how did a student like you get such things?" "I found it. If there's nothing else, I'll head back," Bai Ye replied casually, constantly telling himself to be patient. Suppressing the rising murderous intent within him, Bai Ye ignored the gangsters in front of him and tried to return to the crowd, but was blocked by one of them. "What's with your attitude, kid? A hostage dares to talk to us like that? You think you're so great?" One of the gangsters stood in front of Bai Ye with a contemptuous look on his face. "You're so good looking, let me have some fun with you first." As he spoke, he raised his hand to touch Bai Ye's cheek, but Bai Ye grabbed it before he could make contact. "Hey, you dare to resist?" The gangster tried to pull his hand away and beat the pretty boy in front of him, but when he looked up, he saw a cold, murderous gaze meeting his own. With a soft click beside his ear, Bai Ye felt a sharp pain in his chest, and a warm liquid gushed from his chest. "Do you know how long I've been putting up with you bunch of idiots?" Bai Ye pulled his right hand out of the robber's chest, disgustedly flicking the crimson liquid onto the ground. The sudden turn of events stunned everyone in the hall, including the robbers. But Bai Ye, who had already made his move, wasn't going to waste words with him. Looking at the four robbers surrounding him, Bai Ye's right hand became a blur, unleashing 3 punches in half a second, each aimed at their cheeks. Bang! 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 With 3 muffled thuds mixed with a cracking of bones, the 3 robbers in front of him were hit in the cheeks as if by heavy artillery fire, the terrifying impact sending them flying 4 or 5 meters away. As their bodies crashed to the ground, wounds resembling those from large-caliber rifle shots could be seen on their cheeks, their entire faces caved in due to the immense force. Bai Ye's fist shattered their skulls, and under the immense pressure, a mixture of pinkish-white fluid and blood gushed from their 7 orifices. Only then did the first robber, whose heart Bai Ye had ripped out, collapse to his knees, his legs giving way. In the blink of an eye, 4 of the 7 musketeers had fallen to Bai Ye. 1 through the heart, 3 with shattered skulls. "You bunch of idiots, none of you will leave here alive today," Bai Ye said through gritted teeth. The 2 robbers beside him finally reacted. Looking at their oblivious companions, they aimed their submachine guns at Bai Ye and quickly pulled the triggers. Before they did, Bai Ye had already noticed their movements, and slammed his right leg into the ground. Boom! Everyone felt a slight tremor on the ground as the beige tiles beneath Bai Ye's feet shattered inch by inch. In a second, from starting to accelerating, Bai Ye's body shot forward like a serpent, covering a distance of 8 or 9 meters. Rat-a-tat-tat, a barrage of bullets followed Bai Ye's disappearing figure, relentlessly striking the wall behind him and leaving craters. 3 seconds later, as the submachine gun's magazine emptied, before either of them could reload or draw their pistols, the terrifying figure, still dripping blood from his hand, stood before them. Bai Ye watched the robber try to retreat, raised his right hand high, and cleaved down like a giant axe, tearing the man in two, skeletal, internal, muscle, and skin, starting from his shoulder blade. Instantly, a spray of blood bloomed in front of the bank lobby. Bai Ye then slightly turned his head, focusing on the last remaining robber leader who was still able to move. Staring at the man shrouded in red and black, even a simple glance felt like being watched by a prehistoric Tyrannosaurus. As Bai Ye relentlessly approached, cold sweat broke out on the robber leader's back. He pointed his pistol at Bai Ye's head and fired 3 shots, but Bai Ye easily dodged each one. At this moment, Bai Ye's physical abilities had surpassed human limits. His mental strength of 1.5 allowed him to simulate the trajectory of the pistol in front of him in his mind. His physical strength of 1.7 allowed him to dodge a bullet a second before it was fired. As the leader emptied his pistol, Bai Ye was already in front of him, grabbing the robber by the collar and slapping him hard across the face. "I'm asking you, what are you doing robbing a bank if you can't handle it? What do you think robbing a bank is? You bastard." Bai Ye's right hand continued to slap the robber's cheek, making dull thuds, as he asked with exasperation, "Robbing a bank is fun? You think this is child's play? You're acting out a melodramatic scene in front of me. You can't even rob a teller counter properly." Although he held back, the leader still felt as if he were being slapped by a giant bear, his thoughts incoherent. He was quickly beaten to death by Bai Ye's great memory restoration technique. After killing this robber, Bai Ye impatiently straightened his blood-stained shirt. Gazing at the splattered blood throughout the hall, Bai Ye remained unfazed, even though it was the first time he'd ever seen blood on his hands. His years in the underworld had taught him a lesson he'd learned all too well. Bai Ye rose and went to a corner, pulling his briefcase from a pile of looted cash. He then turned and walked step by step towards the bound hostages. Seeing Bai Ye approach, especially with the bloodstains on his pale face, they all recoiled in fear. Bai Ye walked to the customer service representative, bent down, and slowly and methodically untied her ropes. Under the representative's bewildered gaze, he pushed his briefcase towards her, smiling slightly, opening an anonymous account, for cleanup purposes. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 I'm just a fitness enthusiast. At this moment, Chief George outside the bank was facing a dilemma. On one hand, he could agree to the robber's request, compromise with them, let them leave, and then rescue the other hostages. On the other hand, he could take a hard line, storm in, and potentially cause heavy casualties. But either way, the end result would be a huge blow to the credibility of the NYPD. He personally favored the first option, as it would best preserve the hostages. As for the robbers, George, knowing the power behind the bank, had no doubt about their fate. But his superiors directly ordered on the phone to take a hard line against the robbers, without any retreat. While he spent a few minutes deliberating, before he could make a decision, a series of gunshots rang out from inside the bank, making George tense. Because the robbers had destroyed all the surveillance cameras inside, he was unaware of what was happening inside and assumed it was the robbers impatiently urging him on. Meanwhile, the belated negotiation expert was speaking into the microphone. "Listen up, people inside. We're preparing your demands. Don't harm the hostages. We can discuss any issues." Inside, Bai Ye, covered in blood, listened calmly to the announcement over the loudspeaker as customer service counted the cash in his suitcase and deposited it into his account. This money was now officially under the bank's control, and he wouldn't be held responsible for anything that happened afterward. Only after this was resolved did Bai Ye breathe a sigh of relief. He wiped the blood from his face, washed his hands briefly at the sink, and calmly pushed open the bank door and walked out. The police officers waiting impatiently outside were already quite impatient. Seeing someone emerge, they all looked, only to find it was the same Asian youth. However, compared to his previous clean black and white checkered shirt, Bai Ye's white was now covered in large patches of blood, making him look as if he had just stepped out of a battlefield. George's heart skipped a beat. He was almost certain the hostage takers inside had massacred the hostages. But Bai Ye slowly raised the phone and said, "Officer, everything's alright. The hostage takers have all been killed. You can come over now." "What do you mean?" George wondered, doubting his ears. "You're too slow. I've killed the hostage takers. You can come and close the net, Bai Ye repeated. Killed. The officers beside the walkie-talkie were all stunned. Most of them were killed by me. There was one left with a gunshot wound, incapacitated, so I didn't use him, Bai Ye said cautiously. He then gently tossed the phone aside and walked towards the police. As he approached, a strong smell of blood filled the air, causing the nearby officers to frown. Although completely bewildered, George still went to greet Bai Ye upon seeing him. Soon, officers came to help him, but Bai Ye stopped them, saying, "It's unnecessary, I'm not injured." Indeed, his bones and muscles might have shattered from the force of the blows, but before the battle began, he had allocated all 0.2 attribute points to Constitution, achieving a balance between strength and defense. Bai Ye's current stats are: name, Bai Ye lifespan, 18/400 strength, 1.5 plus 0.2 Constitution, 1.5 plus 0.2 spirit, 1.5 plus charisma, 1.4 plus available attribute points, 0.1. A generous gift, Wang Difa. Oh my god, at this moment. The officers who rushed into the bank exclaimed in shock at the bursts of blood inside. Hearing the sounds from inside, George thought they were overreacting and went in as well, only to gasp involuntarily. Scattered corpses, spilled brain matter, sunken faces, torn bodies, and a small, pitiful, and helpless hostage huddled in a corner. Every visible human organ was scattered on the ground. George, pale-faced, left the bank, ordered the officers to cordon off the scene, and forbade any media entry. He then looked sternly at Bai Ye and asked, "Did you really kill those people inside? Are you a mutant?" "No, just a fitness enthusiast." Bai Ye didn't readily accept the excuse. After all, these people would definitely undergo medical examinations and blood tests during the investigation, and this lie would be exposed. "Are you kidding me? What kind of fitness enthusiast can tear a person in half with their body?" "Chief, I'm the victim. Isn't your tone a bit inappropriate?" Bai Ye looked up and retorted, "In this situation, as long as it's for self-defense, even if I chop them into mincemeat, it wouldn't be a problem, would it?" George was speechless. After all, what Bai Ye said made sense. Judging from the scene, Bai Ye had no connection to the robbery, and his actions were indeed self-defense. In this situation, they could at most conduct some questioning and interrogation, and couldn't even restrict his personal freedom too much. Just as Bai Ye was squatting on the chair contemplating his bad luck today, the reporters who had been watching outside for a long time couldn't sit still any longer and rushed forward with cameras and microphones. Bai Ye looked at the numerous reporters and their cameras surrounding him and said with a gentle smile, "Can you question me one by one? I can't answer everyone's questions at once. I'm a reporter from the Horn Daily. I want to know what happened inside the bank. Why did you come out covered in blood? The blood on my body all comes from the robbers. In fact, the situation just now was very dangerous. Faced with the robbers' coercion, I had no choice but to fight back. I barely managed to kill them all with a narrow escape from death," Bai Ye explained. In this situation, it was necessary to define the public opinion, otherwise, who knew what kind of story would be told in the end? "You killed all the robbers? And then walked out unharmed?" The reporters and the viewers watching the live broadcast were all stunned. Yes, the whole process was incredibly dangerous. One wrong move and I would have been riddled with bullets. "Excuse me, are you a mutant?" a reporter asked, raising his hand in confusion. "Of course not, I'm human. The reason I'm so strong is simply because I have a habit of working out," Bai Ye said. "Are you sure an ordinary human can kill several armed robbers single-handedly without getting hurt just by working out?" "Of course. With the right training methods, you can do what I do too." George, somewhat exasperated, shielded Bai Ye from the reporters, using official language to deflect their questions, while other officers took Bai Ye away for a statement and physical examination. Inside a hospital in downtown New York City, Matthew lay leisurely in bed, but he heard Amy's footsteps echoing in the corridor as she left her room. "What's going on? Why is Amy back again?" Matthew asked, puzzled. Amy opened the door excitedly. "Hey Matthew. We found that passerby we were talking about yesterday." "Yesterday? It's that super handsome young man in your friend's drawing. Let me tell you, he's even more handsome in real life than in the drawing," Amy exclaimed excitedly. Hearing this, Matthew immediately remembered, wasn't he the guy who shot off all his limbs? "Where did you see him?" "On TV." Matthew was stunned. "Ah. On TV? Yeah, I heard he just single-handedly took down a robbery gang." Matthew. Chapter 23 Lawyer. At noon, students gathered outside Osborne's office after their tour. Osborne is so boring. They just keep telling us about the company's history and all sorts of biological experiments, spider, lizard, and mice. Who wants to listen to that? One student complained, eliciting nods of agreement from those around him. By the way, where's Professor James? He went out for a bit, and hasn't come back yet. I don't know. Listening to his classmates' conversation, Peter Parker shook his slightly groggy head and silently left the crowd to head home. Name, Bai Ye, gender, male, home address, ... At the NYPD headquarters, Bai Ye, now dressed in clean clothes, sat calmly in a chair, facing the police's questions. When he killed those robbers, he had already mentally prepared himself. If he really got a year or two for murder, he felt that New York was too urbanized and needed a more retro feel. With his current strength, even if he couldn't directly confront modern weaponry, escaping from prison would be a piece of cake. He could train for 3 to 5 years, and before Thanos even intervenes 10 years later, he'd reduce New York's population by more than 50%. Outside the interrogation room, Chief George, unaware of Bai Ye's intentions, reviewed Bai Ye's past. His parents were Chinese immigrants who lost everything due to gambling and were found dead in the streets, several organs missing. Bai Ye's resume, on the other hand, was much cleaner, simply attending school, recently spending a fortune on a gym membership, and then frequently skipping classes. He was arrested today for robbing a bank because of skipping class. The record showed no criminal record, seemingly without issue. But a little thought revealed how this orphan had survived the past few years, and he had no part-time work history. According to the records, you currently have no job. How did you obtain so much cash? The officer inside asked. Everyone knows I'm handsome, so it's reasonable for people to send me money, right? Bai Ye said. Besides, this is clearly unrelated to the robbery case, and I can refuse to answer these questions. The police officer in front of him paused, glanced at Bai Ye, and then silently lowered his head again, unable to refute him. Knock knock knock. Just as the officer was about to continue questioning, there was a knock on the tightly closed door, forcing him to stop what he was doing. Opening the door, the officer saw George standing at the door, followed by a man wearing sunglasses, using a cane, and with bandages on his hands and feet. Chief, who is he? The officer asked. Bai Ye was also surprised to see the person. Although he had been wearing a mask, he recognized him at a glance. Wasn't this Daredevil, whom he had taken to the hospital a few days ago? He was also wondering why this guy was here. This is Bai Ye's lawyer, George explained. He also couldn't understand why someone from such a poor family would have a lawyer come to his door so soon after the incident. And this lawyer looked so miserable, as if he had just come out of the hospital. My client was first and foremost a victim, and then acted in self-defense. You have no reason to detain my client at the police station, Matthew said righteously to George. 3 hours later, Bai Ye and Matthew emerged from the police station. Although they were out of the station, as a key participant in the robbery, Bai Ye's movements were temporarily restricted to New York City. Furthermore, if there were any new developments in the case, he might need to be summoned for questioning. Why did you decide to become my lawyer? On the street, Bai Ye turned to Matthew beside him. Shouldn't you be thinking of sending me to jail? Can jail hold you? Matthew turned and asked. Do you want me to escape and take revenge on society? To create another bullseye-like criminal? I already know about your family background. I don't want to raise another criminal. Although you're already halfway there, if you repent, there's still a chance you can turn back. I thought superheroes were all the kind who eradicate evil completely, but I didn't expect you to be so understanding, Bai Ye said with his hands in his pockets. Consider it repayment for not killing me. With your excellent physique, are you interested in becoming a superhero? I can teach you, just like my master taught me, Matthew said slowly. He hoped to reform the boy in front of him through his words and actions. You? Teach me. Bai Ye examined the other's bandaged hands and feet. Don't forget who sent you to the hospital. That was a sneak attack when I wasn't paying attention. Your attacks were all brute force. With my skills, I could definitely be your teacher. If it happened again, I wouldn't lose, Matthew said seriously. If he wasn't still injured, he would have wanted to fight Bai Ye again. Then how come your invincible skills didn't let you notice my sneak attack? Bai Ye curled his lips. He would rather practice his strength than his skills. He could just use brute force to overcome all techniques. That's enough. Thank you for coming to be my lawyer today despite your injuries. You can go back now. Contact me if you have any legal questions, Bai Ye said indifferently, his tone like that of a scumbag who had squeezed every last drop of value out of a sycophant. With a helpless expression on Matthew's face, Bai Ye turned around at the intersection without looking back and headed towards the gym, pulling out her phone as she walked. Dozens of missed calls were already displayed, from teachers, the principal, and various classmates she used to know. As Bai Ye walked home, she scrolled through these numbers, finally calling back her teacher James's number. The phone rang twice before being answered, and a hesitant voice came from the other end. Bai Ye, are you at the police station right now? No, I just had a few questions and was out. I'm on my way home now, Bai Ye explained. She continued, Teacher, you know the situation is a bit complicated, so I'd like to ask for a month's leave to rest at home. James's attitude was surprisingly gentle now, completely unlike her previous displeasure. A month? I don't have that authority, but I'll talk to the principal for you. You just need to rest at home for now. Thank you, teacher, Bai Ye said contentedly, then hung up. Throughout the entire process, the teacher neither asked why he skipped class to go to the bank, nor mentioned Bai Ye's murder, acting as if he knew nothing at all. After all, teaching is just a job, and it's best not to ask about such things. Bai Ye, feeling restless from having his phone idle for so long, turned it off and headed to the gym. Chapter 24 Severed Meridians? I did it on purpose. When Bai Ye arrived at the gym, Smith had already been waiting for a long time. After all, Bai Ye's face had been all over New York headlines that morning. It was impossible to ignore him. Looking at Bai Ye, Smith had a complicated expression. Yesterday, he had been anticipating what surprise Bai Ye would bring him today, but instead, he had pulled off such a stunt. Let's start working out, Bai Ye said without further ado, rolling up his sleeves to begin his workout, but Smith interrupted him. Bai, our boss knows about you and wants to talk to you, Smith whispered. Your boss? Bai Ye paused, looking at Smith. Yes, the owner of this gym. He knows you work out here and wants to meet with you tonight, so he asked me to ask if you're free. What about? Well, seeing how good your image is, he's thinking of getting you to be the club's spokesperson or something. The endorsement fee starts at tens of millions, but we can discuss the exact amount, Smith said. What if I don't want to see him? Bai Ye asked directly. Our boss also said that if you don't want to, we can just forget about it. He also wants to be friends with you, so he's offered to refund the money you deposited at our gym. From now on, you can work out here for free 24/7. Furthermore, this New York club is quite old-fashioned, with some outdated equipment. To meet your needs, we can ship the latest equipment over tomorrow. If you require it, we can even custom-make equipment to suit your abilities. That's quite generous. Bai Ye's lips curled up. The other party was so cooperative that he felt a little embarrassed to refuse. After thinking for a moment, Bai Ye looked at Smith. Then tell your boss I don't have time this month, but I'll personally visit him next month. I have a deal worth over $100 billion to discuss. $100 billion, Smith exclaimed in surprise. Yes, you'll see then. Let's start training now. This time, let's go straight for a ton of barbell. I'll start with a set of squats, Bai Ye instructed. He had increased his physique by 0.2 today, which was enough to keep up with his strength, and he didn't have to worry about overtraining and injuring himself. A ton? But the barbells I have here can only hold up to 260 kilograms, Smith said, troubled. It's okay, I'll just stack 4 on top of each other. Bai Ye waved his hand dismissively. But he soon realized that this was impossible, because with the weight plates added, he could only grip 1 barbell with each hand. Even if he was strong enough, he could only grip 2 at most, and maybe 1 more behind his neck. The fitness equipment used by ordinary humans was no longer enough for him. Helpless, Bai Ye had to reduce the intensity of his workout to 780 kilograms with 3 bars. But as the training volume decreased, he found that with this level of exercise, he couldn't even break a sweat, let alone feel tired. As his physical attributes improved, his stamina recovery speed also increased. Even while carrying a nearly ton of weight and doing squats, almost crushing the tiles beneath his feet, he managed 1,000 without his face turning red. Clearly, his stamina recovery was exceeding the expenditure of his workout. If Magneto were here, he could directly increase the strength of the lever in my hand, Bai Ye thought, feeling a pang of regret. After so many days of training, he also discovered that, at the same intensity, when the body reached its limit. The training effect was almost doubled. Unfortunately, with the increase in attribute points, reaching the limit through training would be extremely difficult in the future. Helpless, Bai Ye could only ask while doing squats, "Do you have sulfuric acid here?" "Sulfuric acid? Never mind, I'll bring my own tomorrow." Bai Ye shook his head, rejecting the idea. He should be able to try a sulfuric acid bath with a purity of over 70% now. But the school is supposed to be visiting Osborn today. Peter Parker should already be bitten by the spider, he guessed. Then another idea popped into his head. He looked at Smith and ordered, "Go get a barbell without any plates, and then use it to hit me." "Bai, you mean, use a barbell to beat you?" Smith asked with a strange look. "That's right. I want to train my ability to withstand blows." "Don't worry, don't be afraid I'll get hurt." "Who's worried about you?" "I'm worried about exhausting myself," Smith thought to himself, then picked up a barbell without any plates from the side, strained all his muscles, and swung it at Bai Ye's back. Thump! With Smith's full force, the steel bar in his hand felt like it was hitting a rubber car wheel, making his right hand slightly numb. Bai Ye, who was attacked, felt a slight stinging pain in his back. From Smith's perspective, his fair skin could be seen to turn slightly red, but other than that, there was no change. "Did you use enough force?" "It feels a bit light. I don't feel that vibration in my internal organs," Bai Ye asked while opening the instructions, finding it indeed very useful. "Just 5,000 more hits would increase his physique by 0.1. "I definitely used all my strength," Smith said earnestly, shaking his slightly numb right hand. "How about this? Don't hit my back anymore, just hit the back of my head." "I feel like that would be more effective," Bai Ye suggested. One dared to say it, the other dared to do it. Not long after, Bai Ye, who was doing squats, was struck hard on the back of the head by Smith. Bai Ye gasped in pain, as if he heard bones cracking, his head buzzing. Turning back to see Smith about to swing the stick again, Bai Ye quickly said, "Let's put the training intensity aside for now, hit my back first. It seems my head is still a bit fragile." "Okay." Smith obediently returned to Bai Ye's back, striking with all his might. However, his stamina was inferior to Bai Ye's. After only a few dozen blows, his arms began to go numb, and he eventually had to sit down and rest, watching Bai Ye train alone. Bai Ye, on the other hand, quickly found a new training method, disrupting the circulation of internal energy within his body, destroying its original pathways, in short, severing his own meridians. Feeling the internal energy surging wildly within him, bringing a needle-like pain, a satisfied smile appeared on Bai Ye's face. Description: you have completed a meridian severance caused by internal energy reversal. Total recovery time: 70 minutes. Repeat 34 times, Constitution improves by 0.1. Repeat 124 times, Spirit improves by 0.1. Chapter 25: Acceptance of Amnesty. Acceptance of Amnesty. What kind of amnesty is this? In the evening, Chief George, taking a break from his busy work, felt a headache coming on at the thought of the large group of reporters lingering outside the police station. These reporters were all after a headline story, wanting to interview Bai Ye after he came out. To prevent the situation from escalating and to protect Bai Ye's personal information, he had escorted Bai Ye and his lawyer out of the police station through the back door beforehand. The entire city of New York was abuzz with a bank robbery, especially since the police had spent half a day trying to solve it, only to have it wiped out in a few swift moves by a young man. It was incredibly juicy. Plus, Bai Ye was undeniably handsome, so both those who appreciated his looks and those who followed the plot were intrigued and focused on the story. After an afternoon of discussion, Bai Ye had even been dubbed the savior of the New York police and the Robin Hood of the 21st century online. On television, the news anchor declared righteously, "This humiliating defeat for the New York Police Department has become the biggest topic of discussion within the American police force." Former Police Commissioner Hoover, known for his decisive actions, commented that the New York Police Department's behavior shows they've completely abandoned all pretense of dignity. New York City Mayor Adams turned off the video on the screen and turned to the police department's top officials, saying, "You all know how badly your department's reputation is in New York City. This has seriously damaged the government's image in the eyes of the citizens. This matter must be resolved immediately." Inside the meeting room, the police leaders were filled with unease, wondering why the mayor, who had previously been so laissez-faire about police affairs, was suddenly so concerned. Only a few, like George, understood that the mayor, with the next election approaching, was worried about his voter turnout, hence this sudden, erratic concern. The crux of the matter lies in the crucial issue. You must resolve this matter no matter what. I've summoned you here to get a plan from you on how to resolve it. The mayor looked at George. Since no one is speaking, let the chief speak first. Since you've been involved throughout. George hadn't expected to be involved and stood up helplessly, saying, I think we should strengthen the professionalism of our officers, enhance their training. All right, you don't need to say anymore. What you said makes a lot of sense, but I need a way to immediately reverse public opinion. The mayor quickly stopped him, turning to the deputy chief. Do you have any ideas? I do have an idea. The deputy chief hesitated for a moment before standing up. Since the public opinion surrounding the police department is caused by that teenager, why don't we recruit him? Recruit him, the mayor said thoughtfully. Yes, now the whole of New York is comparing that young man's abilities to our police department. So, why don't we absorb him into the police department? The deputy chief said, but this suggestion made the mayor's eyes light up. As long as we issue a public statement that our police department has learned its lesson and brought in the teenager who solved the bank robbery, the public's attention will only be on that young man. It will also give the public the impression that the government listens to their opinions. Reversing the previous negative perception of being aloof, the deputy chief said as he pondered, increasingly convinced of the feasibility of his method. But that guy didn't even graduate high school. Are we really going to make an exception and let him join the police department? There's never been a precedent for this. George stepped forward and said. What's wrong with that? We don't need to officially hire him. Instead, we can let him join as a special counselor. We won't need him to handle cases, we can just use his name to support us, the deputy chief said. Later, we can promote him as a rising star in the police force. With his looks, he can even improve the government's image. Good, your idea makes a lot of sense. Let's go with your method. The mayor of New York City made the decision immediately, then looked at George and said, since the deputy chief has come up with an idea, you can carry it out. Huh? George pointed helplessly at himself. Otherwise, of everyone here, you're the only one who's had the most contact with that young man. If not you, who will? The mayor said matter-of-factly. George looked around and noticed that his colleagues had subconsciously distanced themselves from him. The mayor looked at George and said calmly, this matter concerns the honor of the government. I remember you've been the director for almost 5 years. I hope you won't slack off in this final period of your term and will work hard. Faced with this blatant threat, George nodded helplessly and said, I understand. I'll talk to him and try my best to get him into the police force. Not try, but definitely, the mayor emphasized. You completed a total of 21,543 weighted squats, increasing your mental attribute cap to 1.6. As the description changed, Bai Ye gently put down the 3 barbells. It was already dark outside the gym, and it was late at night. Bai Ye, who had been squatting at full speed for 7 or 8 hours straight, didn't feel tired at all, only hungry after a long workout. Is that all for today? Smith asked. You can go back now. I'll stay here tonight, Bai Ye said. Now his family background must have been thoroughly investigated, and he'd definitely be harassed by the reporters staking out his house if he went back. Since the club owner said he could stay there 24 hours a day, he might as well make it his home for now. Feeling hungry, Bai Ye left the club and headed towards the shops outside, but a phone call before he left made him change his plans. Looking at the unfamiliar number on his phone, Bai Ye hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello, who is this? How did you get my number? Is this Bai Ye? This is Police Chief George. We met today, and I have some matters concerning the police station that I'd like to discuss with you. What are you doing right now, Chief George? Bai Ye recalled the middle-aged man he had seen that morning. The voice was indeed identical. After hesitating for a moment, Bai Ye said, I'm free for now, about to go get dinner, is that so? I haven't had dinner either. If you don't mind, come to my place for dinner, George invited over the phone. Dinner, Bai Ye frowned slightly, not understanding the other party's intentions, but it shouldn't be a bad thing. After all, if they really wanted to harm him, there was no reason for them to bring him to their home. Okay, Chief, where do you live now? I'll be right there, Bai Ye nodded. After noting down George's phone number, Bai Ye hung up and headed straight for his house. But before he arrived, another call came into his phone, still from an unknown number. Recruitment, What kind of recruitment is this? Let's storm Tokyo and seize the throne. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.